All right, everybody. I am so excited to talk to this man who was so much fun to watch in season 42 of Survivor. So many of us thought he had it until right there when he had a very graceful exit from the game. He joins us now, the Birdman of Survivor 42. Please welcome back Omar Zaheer. Omar, how are you?
I'm so good. Thank you so much for having me, Rob. Longtime fan. Want to know how Amba is? You
Yeah.
doing okay?
Hey, don't just smarten up, Omar. Okay.
Wait, you're the other Rob.
Yes.
We'll make it work.
Yes. Okay. Uh, Omar with jokes that are so fresh, ready to go. Yes. The era is new, but the jokes are the same.
The same. Drop nothing. Actually, keep it all the same.
Keep it all the same. Okay. Omar, how are you doing?
I'm doing fantastic. I'm back at work. Just did the daily grind and also winding down on the Survivor experience, which was truly the most fun I've ever had in my life. So, yeah, you can't complain too much when you get to live out your dream and get slayed on national television.
And you were slaying.
Oh yeah. Everyone who slays must be slayed, so that's fine.
Yes, absolutely.
I actually asked Marianne to plunge the knife deeper, but she didn't want to.
I know that from following vicariously through Instagram, you and Marianne have been having a lot of shenanigans going on and hanging out post game. Anything exciting or interesting to tell the listeners about?
No, I mean, Marianne and we live 10 minutes apart. It's kind of crazy. And before the season, I would drive by her house on the way to the Toronto Zoo when I would work there. It's actually crazy. And so, she's the little sister I already have a little sister, but she's another new little sister that I never knew I wanted or needed. And she's never going to leave me. So she might be in the basement right now. Who's to say?
Okay.
I mean, voluntarily, of course.
Yeah, I think we'd hear her.
I don't know about that.
Yeah. So, we got to talk to you in your exit interview, but then, of course, the finale played out, and we never got to talk to you about your jury vote. How about this? Was there ever any part of you that was thinking Mike, or were you Marianne all the way through?
Yeah. So for me, I feel like a few people in Ponderosa asked me, they're like, why aren't you for sure voting for Marianne? And I was like, well, Marianne, I have a good friendship with her, but she didn't put our friendship above the game, and she's the type of person that if I vote for her, she would want it to be earned and not to just be given because we're friends. So going to the final tribal, I was all about who played the best game for me, at least. And in my mind, my split was 47.5% Marianne, 47.5% Mike, and then Romeo I was going to give 5% to, but I really would give him a chance if he really gave a good solid reason of I'm the GOAT and I did that on purpose, because that's what gets you to the end. I was really looking for someone whose strategy was extremely intentional, and Marianne's was very intentional. She knew what she was doing, when she was doing it, and how she was doing it. And so that's how I voted.
Okay. Omar, how did you end up getting into or being on Survivor? Because I know that you were a lifelong fan, and also that they did not let Canadians into the show from until the last couple of seasons. So how did you ultimately hear about Survivor's accepting Canadians, and then ultimately decide that this was it?
So, I've been a lifelong fan since episode 8 of season 1, and then I went back and watched all the ones I missed. But in that time, at first I never thought I could do it. And then I kind of watched season 6, the Amazon, and there was this guy that made it all the way to the finale. And, I was like, wow, I was captivated by that gameplay. And then when he really brought the energy of believe in yourself, I knew I could do it too. So, as soon as I saw Mr. Butch Lockley play out his game in Amazon, I was all in on applying, but I knew Canadians weren't allowed. But I, for some reason, always felt it was going to be possible someday. And so I was in Atlanta for a veterinary conference when David versus Goliath was premiering, and that's when it was announced. And I put in my application shortly thereafter and heard back after my second application. And here we are.
Okay. And when you sent in your application, could you tell right away that you were going to be on the show?
I did think I had a good chance because I was kind of a weirdo, and also like there hasn't been a vet, there has been very few Indians on the show, Muslim representation is super poor, and this is the era where we're trying to really enhance, other communities and all of that. And so I felt like if I could be a lunatic, then maybe they would let me on, and they made a mistake, but here we are.
Here we are. Omar, it must have been so interesting to, watch everything play out with the season, like it's for anybody who goes on the show. What do you feel like was the biggest misconception about what we saw from you on the show versus what happened in reality?
I honestly felt like the edit was very fair, especially to me. Like they were very kind to me, so I can't really complain about that.
Yeah, everybody that gets a good edit says, it was the edit is very fair, is very accurate.
Yeah, I mean, there were honestly times where I thought they even gave me too much credit for stuff that happened, but I think they showed more of the serious strategist side of myself instead of the goofy idiot that was out there bumbling around. But that's how I bonded with people, was kind of being a weirdo, and there was a bunch of weirdos there too. So I think they left out a little bit of the social game, but you saw the benefits of the social game and how it played out strategy wise.
Okay, so you are going to be in season 42. Were you in the mix for season 41 ever, or you knew automatically this is when you were going?
I think originally I was, being talked to about season 41 all the way up until like a few months before, and they're like, "Oh, season 42." I was like, it doesn't matter to me. They're interchangeable at this point. I don't even know who's on which one or whatever. So I wasn't. I was pandemic casting though. I wasn't originally scheduled to be on the show, so I kind of like sneaked in there last minute. So.
Was it looking dicey at all as to whether or not you were going to get to play? I know from talking to the season 41 cast that there were some concerns at the time of their finale of, we don't know if we can get the season 42 cast to Fiji.
Yeah, I would say that I am not aware of I'm not aware of the logistical difficulties that were taking us there. But what I will say is I was reading online that every flight into Fiji was canceled, and thinking, like, twiddling my thumbs, being like, I'm not sure what's going on here.
They must have a secret plane, right?
Yeah, they must, because they haven't said anything. And I remember like emailing like, "Oh, I'll see you tomorrow." And then they were like, "Yeah." And I was like, "Oh, okay. I guess something must have been figured out." And if there was turmoil, I was never privy to it. I did see some angry tweet online when I got back about a lady who was like, "Why does Survivor get to go to my home country, but I'm stuck here?"
Listen, this is a very popular TV show, ma'am.
I know,
adored by millions and millions of people. Okay.
Yeah, it was honestly the best thing that could have happened because, I got a whole row to myself.
Yeah, it was a very good season. Also, how do you feel about that? Do you take any pride in people saying season 42, really great season of the show?
Oh yeah. I mean, you never want to go on and like have a crappy season, especially as a big fan. So the fact that the reception has been so wildly positive is like it's icing on top of the cake. I would have loved the experience regardless, but then to have people love it made it that much more awesome.
Okay, Omar, do you want to tell us about the start of this adventure?
In like getting to there or starting the game, or
you know where the gold is. So, I don't want to take you to the parts where that are uninteresting of the story. So, where do you feel like is the right place to start?
I guess, I mean, I would start right from when we first met each other, I guess. And, obviously you can't talk or anything like that, but it's really exhilarating to like finally see, oh my gosh, these are the people. And I think I remember being so shocked at how short everybody was. I was like, is this the shortest cast of Survivor in history? But I think everybody just looks bigger on TV.
That is true. That is true of, everybody on Survivor. Although people on Big Brother, if you meet any of them, I find that they're bigger than you thought on TV.
Oh, interesting. Maybe something's in the water there. But, I was kind of like, it was funny reading Tori's pregame and stuff like that, because she had a very intentional strategy about how to dress. And it, definitely worked on me. I was like, who's this frump? Like, what is she doing out here? And she seemed aloof and like kind of not sure what was going on, but she was a lot smarter than people gave her credit for. But I also, had some intention behind my, wardrobe and stuff, because I wanted people to like things to bond with people on. So like I wore my Power Rangers shirt because I love the Power Rangers and I just wanted people to know stuff about me without knowing anything about me. And that's how Jonathan and I first we locked eyes, and he's like, cool shirt. and then I wore bird stuff. So people always knew I was the bird guy from the outset. So starting the game, for me, I'm a very nervous and shy person when I first meet people. So I was very scared to start the game. But having that period of time where you're not allowed to talk and you can get used to everybody really calmed me down. So that when we got out there, I was like, I feel like I already kind of know them, even though I don't at all.
Yeah.
So that was good for me, I think.
How long was the period that you're seeing each other, but the game isn't starting?
We had a 2-week quarantine before because they wanted to make sure it was safe for COVID reasons. And partway through the quarantine, we were allowed to walk a little bit, and so you could see each other, but like there was no interaction at all. And then you have your Ponderosa pregame stuff, and that's a couple of days here and there.
Yeah.
And so you don't know them, but you feel at least comfortable being around them. And for me, that was a big barrier that I got over before it even started.
Was there anybody that you felt like you were vibing with that from the pregame that was not on your tribe?
Oh, that wasn't on my, well, actually the 3 people that I vibed with most, I thought was Jonathan, Marianne, and Chanel. And so Chanel was really the one on the different tribe that I was like, okay, I have my eyes on her. And that's why when we had to send somebody to the summit, she was the one that I wanted to have go. But there were other people too. Like I felt like Jenny and I would get along. Swati and I are both Indian, and I was shocked, honestly shocked. That was the first blindside of the season. It wasn't Jeff's hair. It was Swati being out there with me because I was like, what the hell? Like, I thought I was going to be the only Indian here, so I couldn't believe it. But I didn't get to meet her in the game, obviously. But
okay.
Thank you, Ika.
So how about the start of this season where everybody comes out and you now get to see your Taku tribe for the first time?
Oh my gosh. Okay, so at first I thought it was going to be David versus Goliath too. I was convinced. And then I saw Jonathan and I both had an orange buff. So it's like, okay, never mind. And also that throws out Brains versus Beauty versus Brawn. So I had no idea what to expect, but I was very excited to see Jonathan on my tribe because we had vibed kind of before the game. And I was like, he will protect me from going home pre-merge, So that was my biggest fear. So I felt actually a lot of ease when I saw Jonathan and Marianne on my tribe because I felt like I had a unspoken bond with them, just based off of body language, which which shows you how much you really can count on that because Marianne thought I was going to be the first boot for her body language. But it was kind of interesting. Everybody has different impressions, and sometimes those are good, sometimes those are bad. But I think when there's a bad impression, it maybe takes a little bit more to overcome that. So you always want to put your best face forward even before the game, I feel.
Yeah, I'd love to know a little bit more about your relationship with Marianne to start the game, because, of course, it's such an interesting relationship to track over the course of the season. And now, knowing that you live 10 minutes from each other, I'm sure that came up pretty early on in your conversation. So how close were you to start off the game with Marianne?
Yeah, it's kind of funny. They didn't really show our relationship directly ever. And then I only kind of like indirectly alluded to it along the way. But Marianne and I were very tight. She was my first alliance of the game. I think I was shocked. When we got there day one, you see on TV people run into the forest and make an alliance right away. And that wasn't happening. And I was not about to be the one to do it. So I was just, kind of hanging back, wondering if I was missing something going on. And then I whispered to her right before we went to bed. I was like, we should talk tomorrow. And then we talked the next morning, and then we solidified our Canada Goose Alliance as 2 Canadians. We found out I didn't live 10 minutes away from her before the season. My sister lived 10 minutes away from her, and I'm in her house now. But I had lived with my sister when I worked at the zoo and stuff, so I had a connection to her area, and I moved here after the season. So we knew immediately that we were from very close area. She'd always kind of bring it up, and I'd be like, Marianne, no, shut up. We don't want people to know that we're from so close together. And I did feel like we just had a lot in common, like being science background, nerds, virgins, religious folk, non-alcohol drinkers. She's a weirdo, I'm a weirdo, and she's much more extroverted. So I felt like I could connect to her because she could help bring my personality out, which would then help me in the game. So I relied on her just as much as she relied on me. And we made a good bond from there. So I think we were working together very closely from early on, and nobody really knew that watching the show, which made her blindside of me more epic, to be honest.
It was very epic. And at the very first challenge, everybody loves when we had the fake blood at the challenge. Now, sort of being somebody who knows a little bit about anatomy.
Mm-hmm.
Did that strike you? Did you notice that Hai had returned from being in the woods covered with blood?
You know what? No, because we were so far ahead, Rob. We were already in the
Ah,
ocean by the time they got back. And Lindsay did not put any blood on her. So, she was just dirty. And I was like, well, if you're digging through mud or dirt, whatever, like that makes sense. But the only person that really flagged that in their mind was actually Queen Mariah. Like she was very observant. And would notice things that I think other people wouldn't. And she's the only one that thought twice about Lindsay's appearance. But to
mhm.
me, I was like, whatever.
How did that come up?
I didn't actually, I found out later. Like, Lindsay told me that she came up to her and was like, we're going to talk about that
Mhm.
later. And then I don't know if they ever did or not, but it was never suspicious in my eyes because at the same time, like, it looks like it's a long time that they're gone on the show, but we have no idea how long these challenges take in general or how many knots they have to untie or how far they have to dig and bury or unbury their paddles, which is what they told us they were doing. So it didn't strike me as weird at all in the moment.
Okay. We don't know a lot about the very early days at Taku,
Mhm.
especially because we got to know the Taku 4 so well.
Yeah.
Jackson, we really only saw a couple scenes with him. How was Jackson fitting in with Taku in the early days?
Yeah, our tribe was very, very different than the other two tribes, I would say. We all got along super well. We were really truly like a family. Like we did not want to lose anybody. And we bonded very early. I think very early on in the game, we all shared very personal stories about ourselves. And that really supercharged a bond. And I think for me as a fan of the game, tribal you don't really know what the other two tribes are doing, who they are, what alliances they're making, anything about their game, but you have six people in front of you. So you'd be like, I feel like you should utilize those six people. And so we all got very close. I would say that, my dynamic with Jonathan and Marianne was more of an alliance early on. And then we could tell that Lindsay kind of vibed with us. Mariah was someone that I formed a very special bond with, but she was a little bit more guarded early on. So she wouldn't really like let into the strategy as much. She's deliberate in who she trusts and how she trusts them. But in a fast-paced game, I think that put her behind the eight ball a little bit. And she was very close on a personal note with Jackson. And Jackson's a sweetheart. We loved him so much. But I found that Jackson was a little bit sketchy when I would talk to him. Like I remember going up to him being like, I hope we don't lose tomorrow. And then he's like, yeah, me neither. And I was like, I don't even know what we would do. And he's like, well, we probably shouldn't think about it until we lose. And I was like, okay, I see you. So then,
Mhm.
but I know that he had other things going on. And in hindsight, maybe that was more because he didn't want to cause dissension. But at the time, it really was four of us. And then we were going to split votes on Mariah and Jackson.
Mhm.
So when he left the game, that kind of changed our plans a little bit. But he probably would have been the first one voted out, at least by day 3.
Omar, you said you had a special relationship with Mariah. What
Mhm.
was unique about that relationship?
I loved her so much, and she had like she lost her brother in a very emotional way, and I lost my father a few years ago, and that was very hard on me, and I didn't really process that super well before going on the show, and so I felt very connected to her loss and my loss, and she was like a mother figure out there, a parental figure, and my dad was very maternal in his own way, so I kind of saw her a little bit like him in that sense of she kind of took care of me, and she's really funny too. And
Mhm.
so I really didn't want to let her go. It just was a matter of what was best for the whole situation as a whole. But her motivation to play the game and like really get into it was starting to build. So you never know what would have happened if we had maybe won that challenge and lost the next one, because she was starting to gain momentum with trust.
Yeah, I saw you had a very touching post on Facebook the other day about
Mhm.
how a year ago you were, really, connecting with, the time that your dad had passed away. Correct?
Yeah, yeah. And so that was day 13 of the game. And my whole goal, I was like, I don't know if I'm going to win. I don't know how far I'm going to get, but I really want to make it to day 13, just to celebrate his birthday on the island if I could. And it was so special to be able to do that, especially on an off day, because that was like around the merge time. And so just to take a moment alone was really, really special to me. And, I don't know how much people are familiar with the veterinary work, but I was in an internship program to be a specialist. And so there were times in my first internship, you would work 100 hours a week and get paid very, very little. And, that sort of demand and, working 40 days in a row without a break, like that is what specialty training is like in veterinary medicine. And it's very taxing. And so I was just starting my specialty training when he passed away. And so for the next 5 years, like I didn't really have any time off to like really think about it or process it. And I started to be very afraid of those emotions. Like when I would think about him, I would just shut it down. And I'm not going to think about that. And so out there, when you have time, I really took that moment to just like process the grief and like literally just sat there and thought about the whole thing that happened and how it happened. And it allowed me to like let go and be able to look at the memories and not feel it was painful anymore.
And thank you for sharing that with us. I also, from that post, that it seemed like that your dad would order a McChicken at Wendy's.
Yeah, he was clueless, poor thing. And he would also go to, well, if people are familiar with Tim Hortons and Starbucks, he would go to Tim Hortons and try to order a venti hot chocolate. And they'd be like, what are you talking about? He didn't get it. Actually, when he first came to this country, he went to the store and he bought cat food, like wet cat food, because he thought it was a cat brand of human food.
Just to go back to the early days of Taku, how clear was it that there was something that was medically wrong with Jackson? Because it really wasn't clear in the episode as to whether or not that when Jeff shows up at the camp, like had you known that things had risen to that level where Jackson was about to be medically evacuated from the game?
For me, no. I know Lindsay had, been trying to nurse Jackson into like drinking more water and stuff like that because she noticed. Like Lindsay's a very astute dietitian. She knows when you're not doing your due diligence, and she would always tell us when we should be eating more or drinking more, and not in an annoying way at all. Like she was very good about that. But I think she noticed more. I didn't really notice anything at all. And when Jeff showed up, this is the new era. So I know Marianne kind of suspected something was up, but I was like, maybe this is a new twist. Maybe something's about to happen. And it wasn't until he pulled Jackson out of the camp that I was like, okay, something's going on there. I'm not sure what it is, but he's probably leaving the game.
Yeah. And then what was the just overall thought at the camp there? Did it feel like, okay, but this is like, obviously, you're sad to see Jackson go. Did it feel like that this is going to be, okay, now we are really like having a setback as a tribe?
Yes. And actually this was a very sad moment because we really loved Jackson. We didn't want to see anybody leave, even though he was like kind of our first target. It's not that nobody wanted to do that. It just was the way the things were playing out. And then on a game level, you're losing the person that's going to go. So now you have to figure out a new plan. On an emotional level, we really loved him and wanted to work with him. And then part of me also, this is also kind of a key component for why maybe people overlooked Marianne a little bit, because her reaction was so OTT, and I didn't see any tears. So I thought she was faking for like, drama or something. Like I was like, who is this? She's more concerned about the show than her game. But I mean, it turns out she was just too dehydrated to shed tears, and she was being very sincere. And I know that about her now, but 3 days into the game, I was like, who is this person? But it was actually very stressful because we're down one number. The other people can sit their worst player out now. We cannot lose. That was the mentality. It's like, we can't lose. And we didn't.
You also were very involved you had to do the savvy or sweat challenge. And you were a big part of the team counting the triangles. You and Marianne and Lindsay were the three people working on that after Jonathan counted 11 triangles. But then they realized, okay, let's get down to these top three. How difficult was that to get through the triangle?
It was actually the best moment of the game for me at that point. Well, I mean, it was just started, but it was excellent because I literally went into the game with no skill sets. I am not athletic. I don't know how to do anything. I am afraid of the outside, much like Lydia. Like I've never camped outside. The first time I slept in a tent was at Ponderosa, and I didn't even know that you should put on bug spray outside of the tent. And so I was suffocating all night because I sprayed myself in the closed tent.
Good tip.
Yeah, I'm an idiot. And then so I was like, I have no special skills. So when Jonathan said 11 triangles, my first reaction was, are you fucked? And then my second reaction was, this is actually excellent. Like, they don't understand how to like do any puzzles. So this, and I know how to do this. This is like not that hard. So I actually have something to contribute to the group that they don't have with each other. So it actually was the moment that I kind of felt a little bit more at ease in my game of like, I'm not going to go home maybe because I have something to offer that's different.
Yeah. And then also in the first episode, we got to see how you were starting to, form some other bonds. And this might have been more into the second episode. You started to bond with Jonathan.
Oh,
and
yeah.
That, I went back and I watched these episodes, and to me, I was a little blown away at just like how strong the language is of you and he talking about, how much, basically the term ride or die was thrown around. That basically that it seemed like that this was like a very, very close relationship to start off the game.
Yeah. And actually, before I get into that, I want to back up and say that when we were doing the triangles, they were eventually like, let's go, like the Mariah, Jackson, Jonathan wanted to go up into start the camp, and Marianne was going to go with them. And I was like, no, like we need one more person, because I didn't want to make it 4 and 2. But then while they were up there, that's when Jackson was actually looking for an immunity idol and got caught by Jonathan. And that really put him on the...
That was a secret scene also. Yeah.
Yeah, that was a secret scene, but that actually happened while we were still doing the triangles. And then he told us the next day what had happened. And we're like, oh, okay, Jackson's the one that's got to go. And I mean, early on in the game, it really takes something little like that to like put you on the outs. But Jonathan and I were just like so different, but then we worked together so well out there. And he was very kind to me. He was like a big brother, even though he's younger than me. And he would take care of me when I didn't know what to do survival wise. And then in the game, strategically, I felt like I took care of him. And it was a very reciprocal relationship for a very long time. But he was like, he really took me under his wing survival wise. And I took him under my bird wing strategic wise. And we really did make the perfect human.
Yeah. For your tribe at Taku.
Oh, he didn't teach me anything about Christianity, though. Just putting that out.
Okay. No, well, I was going to ask about that. You had some people who have like a very strong, religious faiths in your tribe, and even if you are coming from different faiths, was that something that bonded you and Jonathan and Marianne?
I don't think that really bonded us per se, but it helped them maybe understand me a little bit better. It's not something we talked about a lot, just because in my life, I've had the experience where if you try to compare my faith to like the more dominant religion, that's met with a lot of hostility to some extent. So they're like, well, it's actually nothing like ours. And I'm like, okay, I'm so sorry. I'm just trying to build a bond here. But then out there, like him and Marianne and Mariah and Jackson, they were all very strong Christians. And then Lindsay's the bad Jewish person. And then I'm a Muslim person. So we all like had different points of view, and we all kind of came together. I was very scared to share that part of me because a lot of people have the wrong impression of Muslims, and it's something that's not easy to be out there with when they know nothing else about you. And it's also a situation where, as a Muslim, you're very outward in your prayer, like you literally prostrate in physically speaking. And so it's like, you don't want to be anything to separate you. But I was also like, I don't want to not be who I am just to win the game either. And they were very understanding and very loving about all of that. So I had a lot of respect for them after that, because I felt like they accepted me for who I was. And so I guess in that sense, it did bring us closer together.
Omar, we saw that Marianne got selected to go to Shipwheel Island, and she kind of like framed like, okay, I'll take one for the team. I'll go to go on this adventure. What was the reaction from the rest of the tribe's perspective of, okay, Marianne is going, and how are we processing that? And then also when she came back, what was the reaction to that?
I mean, it's ironic because her going on that journey really ended my game.
Mhm.
So maybe I made my mistake on day one. But when the boat came to take somebody, initially I was like, I want to know what's going on there, but I don't want to be the person to go necessarily. So I want it to be one of the Taku four. But Jonathan, we also had not built any real shelter. We slept on the beach that first night. And so, I think at home as a super fan, you don't realize that there still is a survival element. And I didn't really take that into account. Like we really were trying to like not die. So we were like, we need to get a shelter done. So Jonathan can't go. Lindsay's a pretty good worker, so she's not going to go. And Lindsay didn't want to put a target on her back either, so she didn't want to go. Jackson didn't really voice interest in going. So it was really Mariah and Marianne that wanted to go. And Marianne was the first one to volunteer. She wanted to take one for the team, and we thought she might get Rice for us potentially. And then when it became that Mariah challenged her on that, and we would maybe do it randomly, at that point I stepped up to be like, I also would go in case it had to be like a random draw. We'd have a 2 out of 3 chance of sending somebody from the Alliance. But then Mariah kind of backed down because she wanted Marianne to have like a good experience as a younger person. And I think that was
very nice.
Yeah, but I think that was a life lesson for Mariah too. Like she has to take care of herself too, and she puts everybody else before her. And I think that was an example of that. And I think she grew a lot from that decision, even if it wasn't the right one for her game.
Yeah. And then when Marianne comes back from the Shipwheel Island,
hot mess. So she comes back and she whispers to Lindsay and I, she's like, I'll tell you the real story after I tell the fake story to the group. And then she pulled us all into the water. And then she goes on this story about, basically says everything correctly, except that she would get an immunity idol. And it was weird. Like she basically implied that she would get an immunity idol good for 2 tribal councils and that other people might lose their vote. But it was very confusing. And then she pulled us aside, Lindsay and I and Jonathan, and told us the real story. And it wasn't that much different than the actual story.
The real story is pretty confusing.
Yeah, but it was like, it didn't seem like, it was very confusing. And I think she also told us all that she told the other tribes that that Jonathan did sweat. And so now we're like, wait, now we have to like lie about him doing sweat instead of the triangles?
Do you mean? Oh, that he carried the buckets.
Yes. And nobody understood why she did that. And she has her reasons, and she'll go into them tomorrow, I'm sure.
Yeah.
But it was very confusing. And I think that actually put people a little bit off by her. And actually that's probably the reason that if she was going to go home against Mariah, that probably was the seed to do it. And I just remember being very confused by her story. And to be fair, she told me the correct story and I kind of believed her, but then it didn't make sense to me that people could like play it safe and not have any consequences for that. So that's why when I went to the summit, I was like, I feel like if I risk it, or I play it safe and you risk it, I should lose something. Mm-hmm. And so that's why I said to Chanel, like, if you would get hurt by me risking it, I won't do it. But to me, that meant like, if I risked it and you played it safe, you would lose a vote. Whereas if she played it safe, there was no consequences to her, but we didn't have the right conversation.
Mm-hmm. Okay, we'll get there.
Yeah.
So talk a little bit about when...
Oh, yeah, so sorry. Mariah also was the most on edge about Marianne's story. She pulled me aside to the water well and was like, that girl, she's giving too many details. She's lying. So I was like, oh, Mariah's like very astute. She knows what's going on. And even though she doesn't know that I know the real story, she knows enough to know that Marianne is lying. And I was very impressed by that.
Yeah. Well, I'd like to talk a little bit more about Mariah, because I feel like that it was, I think, a little confusing to a lot of us as we were, watching that second week play out, where it seemed like more of like a slam dunk to, okay, well, why wouldn't you keep Mariah around, who seems like that, she is going to be, well, again, she doesn't have the advantage of the extra vote. But, it seems like that she's somebody who's going to probably be more of a loyal number for for you and for Jonathan and for Lindsay. So was that close at all in terms of a decision, or was it a slam dunk? It was going to be Mariah the whole time.
I think I think it was decided pretty early on that it was going to be her after the immunity challenge. It's kind of funny because Jonathan kind of like lost that challenge for us. And when we got back,
remind us, which challenge was that?
It was the blindfold one, where then he had to like direct us making a puzzle.
Right.
And he just kept yelling in the challenge, like, don't panic. And I was like, I'm just waiting for instruction. And he kept being
Yeah.
like, you put that there. And we'd be like, who is you? There's two of us. Like, it was very confusing. And
Because
but
the
we
last part of
still
that was that he had to direct you blindfolded to do the
blindfolded,
challenge. Yeah,
yeah.
to
And we were like,
the
who is
puzzle. Yeah.
you? But we still almost won. We were just one piece off. But when we got back, he pulled me aside and he was like, it's me going home. And I was like, no, it's not. He's like, they're gonna get me out. I'm like, no. And at that point I realized, like, Jonathan in the game, from a game perspective, was a little bit insecure, and I could kind of take care of him in that way because he was very paranoid it was going to be him at all times. And then we quickly decided it was going to be Mariah. But I think if Lindsay, Jonathan, or I had really wanted to push for Marianne to go, the groundwork would have been there, just because she had already kind of fostered a little bit of distrust with her story from the summit. But we were pretty solidly with her, so it wasn't really a serious consideration. The thing about Mariah is, like, I love her so much, especially now. Like, I've gotten to know her so well. Like, she is truly an inspiration, and she is like the best person to talk to if you're ever feeling down on yourself. But in the game, she was very guarded and slow to build trust. So actually, Marianne was more outwardly like preaching loyalty. Like, even in the group, Marianne's perspective was like Taku, 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 whereas Mariah's was, well, we don't really know each other yet. We don't really know if we're all going to be working together long term. And Mariah was also having trouble sleeping, having trouble drinking the water, having trouble eating, and was like seemed to be fading. And I think she got a little bit sick as well. And when she left the game, she was sick. And so we were like, we can't lose again. Like, that became the bigger priority of, like, Marianne will hustle. If we go to a swap, she'll hustle in the challenges and we'll stay stronger together. But like, long term, it was in the back of my mind that she's the bigger fan that might stab me in the back later. And obviously that happened. So
Later.
Yeah.
And I feel like we're doing a good job of covering like what happened on the show, but what are we missing that we didn't get to see in the episodes?
I would say that there was just a lot of personal bonding. Honestly, Taku was very boring early on. We didn't really do that much strategizing because it was kind of set, and we weren't losing, and we didn't want to foster paranoia. For our tribe, it was very important that we kept everybody close together. And so by kind of splintering off and being very strategic, like, I think for the first 3 days of the game, nobody really went off alone even. There was very little idol hunting or anything like that. And, the four of us, we didn't even get together as a four in the same room in the same space until after Jackson left, even though it was already in place. Like, it would be 2 or 3 of us at a time that were having the conversation, and we would all know that we were kind of in lockstep. And then in terms of like other stuff, right after Mariah left, it became a very conscious effort for us to go looking for that immunity idol together. Like, we wanted to be able to find it. I think, truthfully, if I had like found it, but nobody saw me, I don't think I would have told them. But then when it was a beware thing where it was going to be in front of everybody, you kind of have to at that point. And then the other thing that happened was, before Mariah left, she said that Jonathan and Lindsay would make a really cute couple. We saw how that played out. But I went to Lindsay the next day because at that point I had a close relationship with Jonathan and with Marianne. And Lindsay and I were good, but we weren't like super close. And I told her that. And she was then freaking out because she didn't want her and Jonathan to be seen as this power couple. And I think really right after Mariah left is when Lindsay and I started to become more together. And then eventually it kind of like took off because we were always thinking the same way. If I had an idea, she had the same idea, and vice versa. And we were always in lockstep, whereas sometimes Marianne would go on a tangent and it was hard to keep track of her. And Jonathan had Jonathan views on things that were very, hard to sometimes change. Strategically speaking. So Lindsay and I were more, I think, adaptable together.
So, Omar, after you go to the tribal council where Mariah gets voted out, you came back and Marianne does, tells everybody, hey, you thought you had 4 votes. Well, now we have 5 because I have an extra vote. And then the next morning, it's seemingly, idol hunt time.
Yeah.
You and Marianne are together. And Marianne finds the beware advantage right in front of you.
Yeah, that was crazy. So we had split up into 2 groups intentionally to go look for the idol that day. And then we randomly chose the 2 groups. And I was a little bit worried that people would see Marianne and I together, but it was random. So we went off, we found it together. And then we told everybody when we came back together. We were actually super happy when she got the vote because we were like, we think we're going into a swap soon, because every time we thought there was a swap and there was never a swap. And so we thought we could use that vote to like gain a majority in a swap situation. So we were very happy about that. And in my mind, strategically, I was like, this is actually perfect, because I have Jonathan and Lindsay on one side, and then Marianne and her extra vote on the other side. So if we go to tribal council again, I can pick which side wins out. And at that point, I was actually leaning towards Marianne and her extra vote. But then something happened that's really funny, that changed the course of that a little bit, because we had a conversation where Marianne thought that she thought that Lindsay and Jonathan were going to vote for me instead of her, because she didn't know that the three of us had been close as well. And she told me she was going to work on getting Jonathan to vote out Lindsay, and that was her plan. And Jonathan and I talked about that. We were like, she's going to try to pull you in to vote out Lindsay and whatever. And then she came to me and she said, I'm going to work really hard to flip Jonathan, but if not, like, I'm not going to go to Rocks for you. And I was like, oh, okay. And then I said to her, I was trying to bail her out. I was like, I think it might be fire and not rocks, even though at that point it probably was going to be fire. And she's like, still. And at that point, I didn't know Marianne well enough to know that she was joking. And she was truly joking, but I thought she was serious. And I was like, this girl is so sloppy and she's not going to go to Rocks for me. Well, I'm not going to go to Rocks for her. And that's really actually when she became the fourth, really truly the fourth in the group, and would have gone home if we had lost anything. And then I felt so bad because it was like a joke, a bad joke almost cost her $1 million. But we never lost. So
okay. Yeah, that's wild.
Yeah. You ask her about that. She's like, I would have had to go to therapy for years.
Yeah. So ultimately, seems like, things are going pretty good. Jonathan's starting to dominate in the challenges. We don't spend a ton of time at Taku in the next couple of rounds of the game. We really see you all find the idol. You knew about Marianne's secret phrase that needed to be said, and did you workshop and practice how that was going to go at all before you got to the mat?
Yeah, we didn't workshop it at all. I mean, I think Marianne wanted to maybe not say the phrase right away, but then she kind of thought she had to based on the language on the advantage. So then she was saying it every round, and we were like, oh, this is like not great that you have to repeat the same thing over and over again. But we never had to workshop it with her because she's creative enough on her own. She was going to figure it out. And I was actually super happy that she had it, because at that time, she was my closest ally. And, I had the information, but I didn't have the target on my back. But the other thing is, like, kind of around this time, after the almost drowning in the ocean challenge, which was actually like super proud of myself for not drowning, even though Jonathan helped that. The Taku worked really well together. Honestly, we all had different skill sets. We came together well, and we worked together very well, but we're also different on paper that at the merge, nobody really thought we were working together. But what was happening at camp was there was a lot of bickering. Like, I would just sit there and watch Marianne and Jonathan get into it about almost getting her foot slammed under the bamboo, and then they won't apologize to each other. And then Lindsay and Marianne really got into it about hot and cold. And on Marianne's side, I think she was more like just like ribbing, but Lindsay was like actually getting mad. And then I had to pull Lindsay aside, and I was like, we can't do this, because she's going to fly off on her own after the merge or swap if we keep like isolating her like that. And Lindsay's like, I know, I need to be better. And she really did course correct there. But I remember saying to Lindsay, like, I'll go fix your relationship with her. So I walked up to Marianne and I was like, so how about that fight with Lindsay, huh? And then Marianne's like, what fight? And then I was like, oh, it was just a joke. Okay, cool. And I told Lindsay, she has no idea. Like, you guys are not fighting. It's fine. And then Lindsay and Jonathan, they really started butting heads around day 7 when, the elements kick in, people get a little hungrier, and they just, they were two different strong people going head to head. And so I felt like the mother hen, and these were my chicks, like literally trying to kill themselves on the road, splinter apart. And I was like, no, like, stay under my feathers and I'll protect you. I was the only one not fighting with anybody, but the bickering got old because it was like just so boring. Like, I'm sure if you went on a winning streak at Shipwheel, you know how boring it can be when nothing changes.
Sure. Also, that my kids have been home from school for 3 weeks now, so there's a lot of them fighting with each other, fighting with mom. Yeah.
So you're the me, And wait, who's
yes.
Jonathan, who's Lindsay, and who's Marianne in your house?
Yeah, we don't need to discuss that, Omar.
I think we do.
Yeah.
I mean, blink
Okay.
twice if Nicole is Jonathan.
Okay. Let's
or
say
Lindsay.
Dominic is Marianne. Okay.
Okay.
All right. And then everybody else can wordle the rest. Okay. I gave you one green circle.
Okay. Perfect.
Okay. So when Jonathan had said at the challenge about how like, oh, we're a tight four, and you said, oh, it turns out, my buddy Jonathan is a bit of a flop. I mean, how big of a deal was that? Was that just so basically like there's not a lot going on, so you have to have something to talk about, or was that really something that you were concerned about?
That was interesting because I feel like that wasn't as big of a deal as they showed. It was kind of like we don't want people to know we're together, and you just kind of let everybody know we're together. But he knew he did that, and he knew it was a mistake, and we didn't dwell on it. The conversation Marianne and I were having on the beach, where she's like, "I'm so mad at Jonathan," was actually, and I was like, "Oh, like I saw that, and I'm so sorry." That was more related to something else. So before that reward challenge, we were strategizing about how to do the braids. So we had to unbraid a rope, and then one person wasn't unbraiding the rope. They were at the end, and they were going to just shoot the baskets, and that's all they had to do. And Marianne wanted to unbraid the ropes with all of us, which would have probably put me on the baskets. But Jonathan was like, no, you're bad under pressure, and you're going to screw it up. And she didn't like to be discounted like that without any sort of like she was kind of shut down in that moment of like, you're not going to participate. And she wanted to participate. I think we made the right decision, but the way that we went about it, Marianne felt not supported. And that's not what we needed in that moment. Like, we need to be a core group that's together. And so she was actually referring to that moment where he kind of dismissed her as a competitor. And I was trying to let her know, like, it's better for you to be underestimated. And she was like, yeah, I know. It's just, I'm not going to let it affect my game. And that's where she was very good. She could be upset about something, but she could in the next moment be like, but it's a game, and we need him, and this is how it's going to be. So she was very good in that way.
Was there any thought that you were going to swap tribes? I know that didn't happen. Yes. And what were you doing to sort of prepare for that?
We'd be like, after 2 people are gone, we're going to swap. Okay, no, it's going to be after 3, after 4. And really what we did is we would reaffirm our bond with each other before we would go to challenge and be like, this is how we're going to navigate a swap. We're going to be together. This is who we could pull in. This is who we may not be able to pull in. Like Marianne had a bond with Drea and Jenny from the summit. And then I had a bond with Chanel from the summit. So we had different connections we could possibly work with.
Yeah. Okay. Yeah, let's talk about when you went to Shipwheel Island.
Shipwheel Island.
Yeah, because that happens right after the challenge with the ladder in the ocean. Okay. Yeah. And you went up to Shipwheel Island, and there was so much talk in the podcast world of how that all ended up going wrong for you and for Chanel. You talked about it a little bit, but can you just tell us about that day?
Yeah. So when Chanel, we didn't know we had to send one of us, but I was like, okay, let's throw a bone to Chanel, because I really think we could vibe with her. We'll send her. And then Jeff's like, okay, one of you get to go. And I was like, oh, that's perfect. Because Marianne wasn't allowed to go because she already went once. Jonathan and Lindsay both didn't want to go, and I wanted to go. So I was like, I'll go and make that bond with Chanel. So when we started climbing the mountain, I felt really bad for her because she was so gassed from their challenge was like twice as long as ours, because we finished halfway through. And you could see how, and Vati wasn't eating at all, whereas we were eating a little bit of breadfruit. So we had some sustenance. And she would like stop every 5 seconds and heave and hoe, and like she could barely make it up the mountain. And I was like, she's so athletic and I'm not. And look at me kicking her ass over here. But I never told her that in the game, but after. Then we get up to the mountain, and then the thing is, I think this is where the inexperience of being a first-time player comes in, because I didn't want to make anyone mad at us by like talking too specifically about what the scenario would be. But
from production, you didn't.
Yeah, I didn't want to like ruin the show by like saying, "Oh, we're gonna specifically talk about exactly what it's gonna be," because what if it's not the same, or what if then we saw season 41 and they did that, and we're like, oh, obviously we should have done it.
Yeah, so there was I had wondered of like, are you not allowed to say like what the thing is going to be? And you just were being too polite.
I think that's like the people pleaser side of me that kind of came out, and it's not necessarily the best quality, but I was like, oh, I want to step on any toes. And so I'm not going to talk about it explicitly. But then also part of me was like, it might be different because there's only two of us. And also I didn't think Marianne's situation made sense. Like I didn't think
poor Jenny had to pay the price
yeah,
because
poor
you
Jenny.
were too polite.
I know, poor Jenny, like literally effed over the whole Vati tribe. But they literally, so when I got up there, I was like, well, Marianne's story doesn't make sense because that's not really a prisoner's dilemma. If you play it safe and the other person risks it, you should lose something. So then that's why I told, like, I had that in my mind when I was talking to Chanel, and she had her own idea of what the true scenario was when she was talking to me. And so I think it became a situation where when I said, I won't do anything that hurts you, in her mind, risking my vote would hurt her. Whereas in my mind, I'm like, if I risk my vote and you play it safe, you don't lose anything. And she told me, like, I cannot lose my vote. And so initially my first instinct was to play it safe. But then as I thought it through more and talked about it, I was like, wait a second. She literally said the words, I cannot lose my vote tonight. So I was like, the only way for her to not lose her vote is to play it safe. So in that case, I should risk it. And we can use that vote for us moving forward if we work together. And if she also risks her vote, then I'm okay on my tribe because all of them have my back. And she was playing me anyways. But I think what happened is we both thought the other person would protect it, and then we both risked it. And so we should have just been more transparent about what the actual scenario was, which we were afraid to do because we were dumb.
Yeah. How much have the two of you talked this through since then?
I mean, I think we both knew. I mean, I even think on the show she knew. Like, she knew as soon as she did it, as she's heading back, that she probably lost her vote, and that was her language when she talked to Daniel. And so it became a very much like, oh, we should have just like literally talked about who would get the advantage. Because I thought the way we left it was vague enough to where she knew she couldn't risk it and I could get away with taking it. And she felt the opposite was true as well.
Did it occur to you at any point that you may have lost your vote between that point and the merge? Yeah.
I was a big dumb bee. I was walking around like literally waddling around like a little pigeon being like, I have my idol nullifier. I have an extra vote. I have everything in my arsenal right now.
Yeah. Okay. And did you tell Taku that you had the extra vote?
I told them that I'm pretty sure I have an extra vote because we knew we had to plan for any sort of swap or merge together. And they also know what the thing is. So to hide that would be kind of crazy.
Okay. So you mentioned the idol nullifier, which, I went back and I watched the episode, but of course that's not going to show up in my notes because it wasn't in the episode. So this happens when around the time that it's the fourth episode? Yeah. And so you win the reward where you get the 10 decently sized fish.
I was so worried about aqua dumping the whole time, Rob, and we weren't eating any food. And we talked about it so much because I was so nervous about going to the ocean and pooping. And then I was
What was the part that you were nervous about?
I don't know. Okay. I only like toilets. Like, I'm afraid of everything else. I would never go in the sand. I think it's repulsive. And so then Jonathan talked me through because apparently he's done it in lakes and stuff. So like he literally went into full detail about the process. So I finally got out there, got comfortable, and I would always aqua dump on tribal days. And then I was worried when we got the fish and I ate 10 fish that it was going to have to go in the night, and you can't go in the ocean at night. So I was actually really nervous.
I thought you were worried that you were going to eat the fish that went.
No, not that we're eating my, situation.
Circle of life.
No, no, but I remember actually that literally consumed most of my thoughts that evening is I hope I don't have to go during the night. And I didn't, but nevertheless, so we got back, we ate these 10 delicious fish, really good stuff. And then Jonathan was getting very annoyed by this point by Lindsay and Marianne talking a lot. And I have a very high threshold for annoyance, so I never really got annoyed by them. Like maybe Marianne, like very occasionally, and she knows that. But like occasionally. And I could always I'm very good at tuning it out. And I feel like in your house, you probably are too. But he's like, let's go for a walk. And I was like, okay, sure. So then he's like, how do you do it? How do you deal with them? And I was like, we're here for $1 million, Jonathan. Let it go. And we were walking to the well, and we saw it just sitting by a burlap sack thing sitting by the tree near the water well. And I've never moved faster than Jonathan my whole life until that moment. And I grabbed it. We opened it up. It said it was an idle nullifier. That was good till the final 5. And then I didn't really want to share it with everybody. So I was like, do you think we should tell them? And he's like, no, we should keep that between us. And so we kept that secret between us for a very long time. And what was very funny is that Marianne one time was alone with all the bags in camp. And she was like, everybody here trusts me. So I know they don't have anything, but maybe I'll just look through their bags anyways. And then she like did a fake look through all the bags. Thankfully, she did not find the nullifier at that time, but
yeah,
she could have.
An interesting mechanism in a season where everything is like sort of like, ooh, beware, and there's a consequence. Like, was it just that they figure, okay, almost nobody goes to the water well by themselves, that it'll have to be 2 people who stumble across this idle nullifier?
Yeah, I don't know if it was that intentional. I think the bigger thing probably was like, oh, this is a season where none of the idols are theoretically a secret. So if and we were like, this is excellent news for us, because now we have an idol nullifier, which I wasn't sure if the other tribes had it, but then I think it was just for the reward. So I was like, we will know who on the other tribes have their idols, and we can use this nullifier on them at the right time to gain a majority for our tribe. So it was like the best case scenario for me to not have an idol, weirdly, but know that who did have an idol and have the thing that can defeat the idol. So I was like, honestly, that's the one I would have picked had I known everything. So I was on cloud 9, but little did I know that it would ruin me later.
Unlike the fish.
Unlike the fish. Exactly.
Omar, is there anything else from the pre-merge that you want to talk about? That I feel like that we've covered like the first half of the game, I feel like relatively quickly.
Yeah, I mean, honestly, we were the boring tribe. We had a little bickering here and there, but like I love all of them so much, and we bonded so closely as a group that I think that was very difficult for people to comprehend after the merge, because they're like, oh, they're not turning on each other, but they didn't realize like how I think really Jackson leaving so early in the way he left put us in a deficit to where we like the situation created a bond that was very strong, I think, and so. Like I loved my time with them, even if it got a little bit stale by the end, and they'll all be family for life.
Okay. Any fun stories from just the time at Taku?
Just Marianne carrying on about how she would have an obituary journal that she would keep as a child, which should have been another red flag that she might have serial killer tendencies.
Yeah. Well, what do you mean an obituary journal?
So she would like look up obituaries and be like, oh, this is interesting. I wonder what the trends will be as far as like cause of death goes across like time. So she would scrapbook them.
Let me make a note in my notes to talk with Marianne about.
And then she would ask us, what is weirder, that or the story of her best friend who would like pick this dead skin off her mother's foot. And I thought eat it, but no, not eat it. So like, which one is weirder? And I think that the obituaries might be a bit weirder. Actually, put that out to the listeners.
More unusual.
Yeah.
It could be like
but like also picking the dead skin off your mother's foot is kind of weird.
Yeah. Okay.
Would you ever do that?
I would not, but I also
I think Roseanne would appreciate it.
Yes, thank you. I also would not pick out the dead people articles. So
okay, well, will you tell Roseanne that she has good Stephanie Wertenberger energy, if you know what I mean?
I don't, but she'll be thoroughly confused.
Okay, we'll give her the message anyways.
Omar, are we ready to talk about earning the merge?
Yes, but one last note is I was actually very, very, very proud of myself for the challenge performances that I had, because I thought I would be terrible. But Taku killed it. So
which one in particular?
Jumping off that giant thing, because the other Marianne didn't want to do it and Jonathan had to pull the boat, and so it only left me to jump off that giant platform and plug my nose. But I got it. And then Marianne and I killed the puzzles. So that was like,
we didn't talk about that, but yeah, you and Marianne did kill the puzzles.
Yeah. And you know what, everyone, no shade to Jonathan, because Jonathan amazingly pushed that boat. And there were times where I was pretending to push the boat because I was too tired. I'd be like, and they would be really pushing it. And he killed the physical part. Lindsay killed the physical part, but then Mary and I killed the puzzle part. And so it really was like we all worked together so well.
Okay. So, all right. It's time to earn the merge.
Earn the merge.
Earn the merge. Okay. And a few new twists. Okay. All right. So, first of all, you're not going to be with the rest of Taku because Marianne and Jonathan are together. Lindsay is going to draw the gray rock, and you were going to be with a group all full of new people participating in the challenge. Okay. Applebee's is on the line, Omar.
Yeah. It was so disheartening because when I saw the rocks, you know, I said this gigantic ball getting up that mountain, there's no way I can do that. So the only way I want to play is if I'm with Jonathan. If I'm not with Jonathan, I want that gray rock. I don't want to play this. And then the worst situation happens where I'm stuck with like Romeo, Chanel, Drea, and Mike. And I'm like, okay, we're going to lose. We're going to expend all of this effort for no reason. And I don't even get to just like sit on the sidelines like my girl Lindsay and my boy Roxroy. And I'm separated from my whole tribe. So it sucked. And I knew we were going to lose, and I was going to be one of the 6 people eligible for elimination. But you know what?
Didn't know about the hourglass.
I did not know about the hourglass. It was speculated, though, by both Drea and Lindsay independently, actually. So, you know, we were kind of prepared for that scenario. But, you know, we pushed the ball out. Mike kept getting sand into my mouth. I'm like, Mike, stop. And then we get to the end. We almost win, whatever. Well, actually, no, we were keeping up, and then we really fell behind getting people up. Then we lost because we were so far behind. And it was kind of like a really devastating moment until we learned we got rice. And actually, it sounds so stupid as a fan because you don't care about the survival aspect, but it actually meant so much to just eat a little bit of rice at that point because we weren't really eating that much at all, other than the fish Jonathan would occasionally catch. And we ate better than the other tribes because we had a little bit of fish and breadfruit, but we still weren't eating that much. So we were very thankful for that. And, you know, in that initial dynamic, I was very worried for myself initially because there was me. And Jeff made it so clear that Roxroy was going to get something crazy at Exile Island. So for me, I kind of wanted them to send Lindsay, but they were thinking differently. And when they sent Roxroy, I was like, crap, like he's going to be safe no matter what. We can't even like target him because you never know what's going to happen. And then so it's like the 5 of us, and you have Chanel and Mike, and then you have Drea and Romeo, and I'm in the middle. Like the easiest person to pick off is me. So I was like kind of freaking out in that moment, being like, this is the first time I'm like in danger. But obviously I had the connection with Chanel. So I went up to her and I was like, oh, are we still good? Like, did I like your tribal went okay? And she's like, no, I lost my vote. And I was like, shoot. And because on the show, they made it look like she never told me, but she told me very early on that I lost my vote. Yeah. I was talking about something else that she wasn't divulging to me. But I was like, okay. That's interesting. Okay. Yeah. So I was like, we're good. And she's like, we'll talk another time, though, because it's too early. So I was like, okay, we have time. And then I started to try to build a bond with Mike a little bit. And our plan as Taku going into the merge was we would just go all in separate directions. We wouldn't hang out with each other. I like didn't talk to them at all for the first few days because it's like we all need to be in separate conversations. And the only strategic conversation I had on the first day, aside from that little tiff with Chanel, was actually when we were divided into the 2 sides and they were trying to decide to send Lindsay or Roxroy. Drea had whispered on our beach, like or on our mat, like Marianne's doing all the talking, like thinks she's running the show. And up until that point, I had been worried. We thought Drea would work with Taku because of what Marianne was saying. So I was afraid that because Drea and Marianne were sleeping by the fire that night, that Marianne would divulge too much information to her when she clearly doesn't reciprocate that feeling. So the only strategy talk I really had that day is I went up to Marianne. I was like, don't tell her anything tonight. She's already talking against you. And so thankfully she got the message and didn't divulge our tribe's plan. But it was very slow as well. Like the merge was slow.
See, on the show, it felt like it was moving very fast. And it seemed like that this is really where your game started to take off. Like I know that you did a lot of good work at Taku in the first half of the game, but it seemed like that we start to see you have like all of these conversations with, you know, with Mike and with Hai and with, you know, all these other players that are in the game.
Yeah. So I think my mindset going to that first day was like, I want Vati and Taku to work together because I have that bond with Chanel. I want to kind of be the middleman between that. Chanel and I can be the power brokers and everything can go between us. And at that point, Chanel was still telling me like, Vati's good together. Like they all trust each other. And I remember her, Lindsay, Mike, and I had a conversation at the well where we're like, Taku and Vati, it's done. And they were acting kind of weird about it, but I didn't really know why. And then it started to come out. Like Lydia had told me while we were all, I think you saw on the show, we were all in a circle watching the sunset. Lydia had briefly told me something there that their tribe was a mess. And I was like, oh, okay. And then the next day she had told me that, you know, Chanel had like lied to everybody on her tribe. And then I started really bonding with Hai as well. And he and I were starting to get very close because we both love animals so much. And he's a really funny guy. And we share like a good, like a similar sense of humor. Like, I guess we both can be crass. So I guess it's the same sense of humor. And we were very bonding about animals and stuff like that. So he and I started to form a good relationship. And, you know, he was really the power broker of Vati, it seemed like. And even though I wanted to work with Chanel so much, like she wasn't giving me much information. Like I knew that the other tribe members were telling me what a mess Vati was with their votes and the ties they had and stuff like that. But up until that point, Chanel had only really told me that there was like harmony in their group. And then she did later say that Mike voted for her, but it was after everybody had already told me that. And she wasn't telling me Mike has an idol. And I'm like, I know you know that Mike has an idol. So the fact that you're not divulging that makes me think that you're not really with me. And there was one point, they kind of showed it on the show where Hai and Romeo are having this very intense conversation. And then I just like am waving in the background. I was actually about to go up into the camp and reveal everything I knew in the game to Chanel to hopefully like get her on board with me. I'd be like, okay, these are the idols. This is what's going on. Like, can we come together and actually formalize something? And that's when Hai stopped me. He's like, come on over. And then so I sat down with them and then it came out of like, wow, like Chanel is a liar. Like she will take any information you give her and twist it against you, but she won't give you any information. And I was like, holy shoot, this is exactly what I was about to do. I was about to tell her all the information I knew. And it almost seemed like divine intervention that he was stopping me from doing that. And so I was like, oh, okay, like I can't. And even in the show, he tells me you don't have a vote. But I knew at that point I didn't have a vote. So I was like, oh, really? Okay. So at that point, that's when Hai really pulled me in with him. And then we had a more in-depth conversation where we were like, it's going to be me, or he said, it'll be me, you, and Drea as the final three, and that's done. And that's the first time at the merge where I felt safe at that point, because now I have the two power brokers on the other tribes wanting to work with me. You can also tell me when to stop whenever, but
no,
it's
I mean,
kind of the story's unfolding.
This is your story. Okay.
Yeah. So then it's like, okay, Hai, Drea, and I are the final three, but my relationship with Drea was always kind of through Hai. Like we didn't really formalize a lot one-on-one a lot because Hai was kind of the middleman.
Okay.
So I did go talk to her.
Yeah, let's just stick with the Chanel part of the story for now, and then I want to talk about your final three. Yeah. So at that point in time, then you abandon all plans to work with Chanel.
Yeah, so that was really the moment where I was like, okay, like Chanel has to go. Like clearly I can't trust her. They're telling me I can't trust her. Her own tribe, like Mike, Lydia, Hai, all telling me that she's untrustworthy. And I had been trying to get information from her and she wouldn't give me anything. And from her perspective, I think it was she got caught doing too much too early. So now she doesn't want to give anything away. But with me not having any more context, it's like very clear to me that she's being very loyal to her tribe, who's not returning that loyalty to her. And I can't really trust her going forward, basically.
Because basically also, you know, you're under the impression that you have to vote somebody out of the not safe group, which you are a vulnerable person. Yeah. So the only people that are eligible to be voted for right now are you, Chanel, Mike, Drea, Romeo, and
maybe Roxroy, but everyone kind of just assumed he had immunity.
And so were you, when you were trying to work with Chanel, was there a person from that group that you were pushing for?
Yeah, it was Ika. So either Drea or Romeo. Drea was obviously the bigger threat between her and Romeo, but whatever, like if we need to split the votes, we would do that and let it play out however it may be. But that was never like formalized as a plan. It was more of like, this is what we should do. And then at that point also, actually, while I was having my conversation with Hai, I was freaking out because I had already told Chanel we should do Taku and Vati against Ika. And so I was like, shoot, like she could use that information to tank my game. She's the only one that has information that could tank my game at this point. So at that point, I decided it was in my best interest to come forward with that information first. And so I told Hai, like, Chanel wants to go after Ika. That's what she told me, but obviously I don't even know if that's true because she's lying to everybody. And then the other thing that made me, so Hai also made me not trust Chanel, but also Drea as well, and Romeo. So in that group of 5, Chanel was telling me she had my back and she had Mike's back because they're both Vati. But Romeo told me that she also told him that she had his back. And then Drea told me that Chanel told her that she has her back as well. So I was like, Chanel, you've told everybody who's available for elimination that you have their back. So like, whose back do you really have? So I think all of that information combined really put me off of Chanel. And I was like really ready for her to go home because she's the only one that had information that could ruin me.
It seems like that there was just like a ton of information sharing between everybody in the season. And if anybody was sort of like double dealing, that it seems like that, especially at this point in the game, it's just getting back to everybody. Romeo, Tori, like anybody that's sort of like, telling, maybe like playing both sides. It seems like that is getting back to the people that it shouldn't.
I think that was more selective in terms of who was on the outs. So like coming into the fake merge, Tori was like torn to shreds especially by Drea, in terms of her like gameplay. Like when she got to the merge, initially I had vibed with Tori quite a bit. Like I love Tori. I think she's so funny, so personable. And I thought I could work with her. But then when you hear everybody around you saying, especially for people from her tribe, saying that she was dumping out her water so she could go look for an idol and being sneaky. She would look through bags for advantages.
Why didn't she drink it?
I don't know. Maybe she didn't want to go pee so much. Or she was like looking through people's bags or telling lies to everybody and turning on them and pitting people against each other. Like that's the first impression we had of Tori from Drea, and mostly Drea, because I don't think that Romeo really threw her under the bus. So we were like, okay, well, we can't trust Tori. And so anything Tori did was under a microscope. She could be like singing to the sun and it would be like the devil's words. Like it was like crazy. Like, and the same thing happened with Chanel, where her whole tribe was throwing her under the bus constantly. So, in hindsight, you look back and you're like, Chanel wasn't doing anything that sneaky at the merge anyway. But it was like the bitch eating crackers, where like, look at that bitch eating crackers, like what a monster, but she's just enjoying her crackers. Like it was like kind of crazy. Like, and that dynamic happened with Romeo, Tori, and Chanel, I would say. Like they were kind of put on the outs very early on, and anything they did was seen as sketchy. Whereas other people could do the same things, but not be looked at under the same microscope.
Any other interesting relationships you're forming here at the merge?
Yeah. So the next kind of phase of the game then was Hai, and I think Hai said in his exit interview that him, Dre, and I kind of put together this alliance of 8. That wasn't necessarily my experience because I felt like I was like the last one. Like I think that Hai, Dre, and I had a core 3. But then as far as the alliance of 8 goes, I felt like I was kind of one of the last people to find out about it. And it may have been less so because I was the last person brought in, and more so it's like just timing of everything. But basically, it was Drea and Roxroy from Ika. And then you had Lindsay, Jonathan, and I from Taku. And then Hai, Lydia, and Mike from Vati as coming together as this 8. And I was like, okay. But in my mind, I was like, this is not the 8 that I put together. And they're leaving out people like Marianne that I have trust in. And I'm not the power broker here. So like, this is okay short term, but like long term, I'm not down for it.
Yeah.
But I'm not going to necessarily tell them that. And it seemed to be very quick that 8 was solidified on, I guess, the day after the merge, fake merge, whatever. And so in that moment, like Hai and I bonded really intensely. So he was probably my number one loyalty aside from Taku. And at that point, it was kind of uncertain if he would supersede that loyalty. Like I felt really close with him. So I was like, if I'm going to betray Taku for anybody, it's going to be Hai. And then by proxy, Drea was there too, even though she and I had only had brief conversations. And then Lydia was actually another key cog in the wheel because I felt like Mike and I had a good relationship personally, but all our strategy was also through high. But Lydia and I, the key cog here was on day 13, which was, that was my dad's birthday, so I remember it very vividly. Her, Drea, Jonathan, and I were sitting on the beach watching the sunset, and then we started to go up. And I said, I'm just going to take a few moments to be on the beach by myself. Like, I'm not going to look for an idol. I just need a few moments. But right before that, Lydia and I had a conversation being like, oh, we're like the losers in this group of 8. Like, we could always flip the game later on the bigger power players. And she was like, yeah, like you and I can work together to get out the bigger players later. And so that was something that I had kept in mind of, like, with the 8, I can actually work with Lydia to get out who we need to later, to topple the 8 if we need to. But they didn't really show that conversation on the show, but that was a big part of why the vote flipped onto Lydia later.
Okay. It seems like in, getting to know you a little bit, you talk about, your relationship with Lydia. You seem very close, but you were not really together for much time in the game. Was that a bond that we didn't really get to see on the show, or did you become much closer after the season?
Oh, definitely closer after the season. Like, in the game, I loved Lydia, but she was very, I think, reserved. And I think she didn't want to come across as a lunatic to all these new people. And she didn't let her freak flag wave. So, I'm forever part of the BFJA posse.
Yes.
But that bond was largely after the game, I would say.
Yes, you put on a hat, which is hard to read. Let me go. So it says, ask me about my huge all-star survivor.
Yes, exactly.
Yeah.
Exactly. So I love Lydia. I will always love Lydia. I'll always have her back. And she was so young in the game, and she took her blindside with so much dignity and grace. It was like unbelievable what a good sport she is. And I will always love Lydia. But in the game, she did become kind of a sacrificial lamb because there was no other option for me at that time.
Okay. Are we ready to talk about what Roxroy did?
Yeah. So going into that immunity challenge, literally Chanel was dead on arrival. Like, she was going home if she lost. Romeo was going to get the split vote. And to put some context into Romeo's game, I know there's been some debate of, like, was he being gaslighted or was he being paranoid? And I think, there's probably a bit of both truth there, both ways. Like, Romeo was I think he sensed that people didn't really want to work with him. And then he kind of freaked out about it and he couldn't remain calm. And I would try to talk him down a lot, being like, Romeo, like, it's okay. Like, and it was hard because I was pretending to be on the outs too. So actually that's part of the story that's not really being shared yet, but it was like, I felt like within the Alliance of 8, I was kind of like, no, I wasn't actually 8, but like the outsiders thought that I was with them. And then the insiders thought I was with them. So it was like very good because I could like play both sides.
Yeah. Can I ask about that? Because was that something that you said, okay, I'm going to come into the game and I want to try to execute this strategy? Or is this just something like the light bulb went off in your head and you realize, like, oh, the people on the bottom, like, because they're talking to me, they also think I'm at the bottom?
Well, there was a wise guy in Amazon that said never lose the bottom feeders. You got to always have them to some respect. You want a relationship with everybody. So I think my only strategy going into the game was to have a relationship with everybody. And then whatever happened from there would happen from there. But, it was very clear. And I think part of this is who I am. Like, I'm not the most athletic. I'm not the least athletic. I'm not the strongest. I'm not the weakest. I'm not the smartest. I'm not the dumbest. I'm not the most social. I'm not the least social. So being kind of in the middle really helped. It was so funny because Romeo would come up to me and be like, we're the weak ones and we need to stick together and we're on the outside. And then simultaneously, like, someone like Roxroy would come up and be like, we're the strong ones. We need to stick together. And I was like, all right, sure. Like, I've never been described as strong before, but whatever. So I was like, okay, great. So like, opportunity kind of presented itself and I would kind of play dumb in terms of like, oh, I don't really know what's going on. I feel on the outs. And Tori and Chanel and Romeo, they kind of ate that up a little bit. And I did have relationships with them. It's just that I didn't want to work with Chanel long term because I felt like she could bury me with what she had. Whereas Romeo and Tori, I was trying to cultivate those relationships because we could use them later on, kind of thing. So going into that immunity challenge, like, I was all about getting Chanel out because she's the only one that could destroy my game. She's clearly, well, at the time I thought she was very untrustworthy. And, Romeo was kind of the backup. And and that was perfect because only one of them can win immunity. So when Roxroy flipped time, I was actually like not super happy about it because I knew that in that current configuration I was safe. But obviously it's nice to have immunity. But then I'm looking at the other side and you have all 3 Taku members that are now vulnerable. And you have Hai, who's my other close alliance. And now I have Lydia as well, who's in the alliance of 8. So this is probably like the craziest day for me because as I was watching that immunity challenge play out, like Chanel got her stay of execution. And then I'm looking at the lineup and like Tori is dead if she loses this immunity challenge. Like everybody's coming after her. And then she wins immunity. And I'm like, oh my gosh, like we're going to have to start playing now. And so I'm looking, like even sitting on the bench of that immunity challenge, I was watching how that was playing out. And as soon as Tori won, I'm looking at the field and you have 5 people vulnerable, 4 are in the alliance of 8, and then it's Marianne. And so I was like, she's going home. And then I said to myself in that moment, like, no, it's Lydia. Like I decided on the bench, it was going to be Lydia at all costs. And I just had to figure out how to do it. So, and then even like the whole boat ride back, like I was trying to think of what to do to get Lydia out. And I felt so bad because like she didn't do anything wrong. It was just that I didn't want to let Taku or Hai go. And she was the only one left. So
yeah, just to reset, the only people eligible now because it's flipped are Lydia, Marianne, Jonathan, Lindsay, and Hai.
Yeah. And in that configuration, again, I was not going to let any of Taku go or Hai, who I was very close with. So it unfortunately fell on Lydia, who I had planned to work with long term, but it was like there's no other option here. So as soon as we got back to camp, Lindsay actually pulled me aside right away. And I was like, oh no, Lindsay, like we haven't talked this whole time at the merge. And now you're like pulling me very obviously in front of everybody. And I was like, dang. But we go down the pathway, which is right by the pooping area. And she says to me, like, I say, I have a good idea. And she's like, I have a good idea too. And Lindsay and I had been so in sync that I thought we were going to have the same idea. But then she's like, we need to vote out Marianne. And I was like, no, we can't do that. Like, we need her still. It's going to be Lydia. But it's really good if people think that you want Marianne out. So I said, go tell people you want Marianne out. That's fine. But go find Jonathan and tell him it's Lydia. So that's also, you saw in the clip of her on the show, right after that conversation, she was talking with Chanel and Lydia on the beach, being like, it should be Marianne. That was after our conversation where she already knew it was going to be Lydia. And then I stopped Marianne on the pathway and she and I are talking and she's like, it's got to be Jonathan. Like, we're going to be fine. It's time to cut our meat shield. They're going to come after him anyways. And I was like, Marianne, they're lying to you. They're all voting for you. You are the one going home tonight, not Jonathan. And that's when she's like, shit. And I said, what you need to do is like, I will save you because you have an idol. So regardless, you're not going home, but I will try to save you and your idol and your extra vote. But for this plan to work, like you need to go back to camp and pretend not go on conversations. Just as hard as that is, like you need to go sit in camp and act very cocky and happy and like you're not going home because everybody here knows you have an idol because of the rabbit thing. So you need to go and pretend you're just being Marianne, and people will start to get suspicious as why is she acting so normal when she knows she should be on the chopping block. And then I said to her, I'm not going to talk to you for the rest of the afternoon, but if you hear pineapple pizza at tribal council, play your idol because it means I wasn't successful.
Oh my God.
So and I said, people are not going to talk to you because they're going to try to I said, I'm not going to talk to you again because I don't want our cover to be blown. But like, if you hear pineapple pizza, that's your cue to play your idol. If you don't hear it, you are fine and you do not need to do anything. So then at that point, I still don't know if I'm going to have to get her to play it or not. But she goes back to camp. And then phase 1 of my plan is initiated where I go to Hai and Mike. And Hai is very scared that it's going to be him or Jonathan as the biggest threats. And he still wanted Jonathan around as a meat shield at that point. And I could see that, like he verbalized, like, I think I'm going home or Jonathan is going home. And I said, like, I'm immune, so I will like fight for you in the game. You're not going to go home. But the problem we have now is if Marianne plays her immunity idol, you or Jonathan could go home. So we need to put 2 votes onto Lydia. because Lydia told me on the way up to camp yesterday that we need to flip on the bigger players. So that's where that conversation came in, which was true. How much Lydia was like actively trying to do that, like I think she's just being Lydia and being agreeable. But I was like, that's how we do it. So we can put 2 votes on Lydia, and they were both like, we'll put the votes on Lydia. Everybody else will vote for Marianne. So phase 1 of the plan was really like, I think this is where Dr. Amanda Rabinowitz and Shannon Gus's strategy of the jet ski strategy came into play.
Yeah,
like,
you had tweeted at one point that actually it's Shannon Gus and Dr. Amanda Rabinowitz's fault that Lydia got voted out on day 14 of Survivor.
Yeah. So, you know, I had listened to their podcast in pregame, actually, while we were quarantining. And there was the jet ski strategy of like, if you want to buy a jet ski from, or if you want your parents to buy you a jet ski, you don't ask for the jet ski first. You take a little bit before you're going to take a lot. So that's what came into play here was
What do you ask your parents for? A boat?
I think you ask them for like a bicycle, even though I don't know how to ride a bicycle. So maybe like a scooter. And
so then your parents will say no bicycle, and they buy you a jet ski.
Listen, I have no interest in a jet ski. This is a Shannon Gus, Amanda Rabinowitz thing, but like I would prefer like
I feel like that can't be right.
I feel like for me the analogy would be like I want an emu, but like I'll ask for a budgie first, you know?
Mm-hmm.
Like I want that emu and those legs and dem neck, but like I'll ask for a tiny budgie first and then take the emu later. So that's kind of what this situation was, is like if I can get them to agree to something small, like putting a couple votes on Lydia, and I'm still actively targeting my own tribe member of Marianne, then it doesn't look suspicious to them. And I'm just looking out for the group, which to an extent is true, but I also just was looking out for my tribe and I didn't want them to go home. So that was phase 1. Then phase 2, you kind of saw me on the beach or at the water well with the outsiders. So it was like myself, Marianne, Chanel, Tori, and Romeo and Lydia. The 6 of us were there. And then we threw out the name Jonathan. And I was like, this is phase 2 because I need to incentivize them to flip off of Marianne and onto Lydia. So the way to do that is to get all of these people to vote for Jonathan. And so what happened is they all agreed to vote for Jonathan. And I was a little bit confused because Lydia was in that conversation, but she's also part of the 8. So I said, okay, we'll settle on Jonathan. We just need to get one more vote because I don't have a vote. So we need to get one more person on board. So all of you go work and do that. Let's break off into 2s. And then Lydia and I went off, and that's the conversation you saw on the show where I was like, Lydia, like, are you really thinking of going against the 8 right now? And she's like, well, I don't know, like we could go Marianne or Jonathan, but I am thinking about it. And I was like, Lydia, you're the swing vote tonight. And she's like, I am the swing vote tonight. I feel so bad. And then she's like, well, maybe we'll just do Marianne this time and we'll get Jonathan later. And then that's when I go back to Mike, which I don't think they showed that part on the show. But I said to Mike, I was like, we have a problem now because Lydia is calling herself the swing vote tonight. She might want to vote on Jonathan. All the outsiders are voting for Jonathan right now. So if Marianne plays her immunity idol and she's acting really weird at camp right now, then Jonathan will go home, not Lydia. So I was like, Mike, do we vote out Lydia? Or do we stick with the plan and hope for the best? And he's like, we got to get Lydia out. So I was like, okay, great. So then I went to High and told him, and he was like, okay, like that makes sense. We'll vote out Lydia, and all of us will freeze out Marianne and not talk to her so that she plays her idol and flushes it out. And then I went around and I found Drea and I told her right before we left for tribal council, because I couldn't track her down. I was like, we're going to vote for Lydia instead. This is why. That was done. And at one point I had a conversation with Jonathan, which is the one you saw on the beach, where he's like, go to work for me. And I was like, I have been this whole afternoon. And I was like, Jonathan, like there's a couple of votes going on you, but like, don't worry. And you're not supposed to know that because otherwise people will know that I told you and that we're working together, but like, just don't freak out. Lydia's going home. And then he's like, okay. And then the next thing I look over, he's like talking to Romeo on the beach, being like, I know you're voting for me and you should vote for Marianne tonight, not me. You should know that I'm not getting out tonight. And then Romeo comes to me freaking out that Jonathan knows the plan. Somebody told him. And I was like, oh, you're going to blow the whole thing. And then Romeo's secret plan before tribal was to get Marianne to play her idol because he thought Marianne was getting all the votes. So he was like, we need to whisper her to play the idol. So he tried to get her to play it at tribal council, but because he really thought she was going, but I didn't say pineapple pizza, so she didn't play it. And that was how the story of Lydia's death.
Wow. Was there ever any thought for you to let Marianne go and not say pineapple pizza?
No. Well, I mean, she wasn't going home at that point, but I guess I could have made the decision earlier to let her leave the game. But I had such a close bond with her, and I didn't want to lose my Taku tribe members because I felt like going forward, the more people that you have that know you and will work with you over other people, the better. Obviously, hindsight is 2020 because she's the reason that I went home in the end. But like in the moment, it was like I want to protect the people that I'm loyal to, so that's how I'm going to do it. And Lydia just fell outside of that. But so I don't really regret it. If you're totally results oriented, maybe you could argue that that was the wrong thing to do. But I also think that that allowed Taku to have a stranglehold on the rest of the game. So,
yeah. Okay. So then after that tribal council, are Hai and Mike upset about, hey, what happened? Why?
No, because I mean they were in on it. They were part. Oh, I think we all chalked that up to being like, oh my gosh, she's just got balls of steel. Because the thing is, like, I didn't talk to Marianne. Nobody talked to her to tip her off on what to do. Like, because we had already planned that the queue was at tribal council. So everyone was just like, oh wow, Marianne just has like she's like, they just didn't understand. They were like, oh, she's like, she has balls of steel, basically. Like we were all just like, oh, we'll have to get her to flush it next time. And then I was like, Marianne, stick with the pineapple pizza strategy. But then also it worked out perfectly that I didn't have a vote because I could play very dumb with the outsiders. I was like, oh my gosh, I was blindsided too. Like I had no idea that was going to happen, except for Jonathan whispered to me at tribal that it was Lydia. That's the only reason I knew. And actually what was funny is I also told Marianne not to vote for Lydia because then she would look like she was in on the plan, and not to vote for Jonathan because he was already getting a couple of votes, but throw your vote off any way else you want. And so when we saw the vote for Lindsay, we were like convinced Marianne did it. And we had no idea that Roxbury went rogue. And so even after Marianne was denied, Marianne had this story of like, I didn't know who to vote for, and Lydia's torch went out before tribal, and I saw that as a sign of God to vote for Lydia. And we were all like, this is the stupidest lie we have ever heard in our lives. And it wasn't until I got to Ponderosa and found out that Roxbury voted for Lindsay that I was like, oh, she was telling the truth. Like, it's kind of funny because everybody in the game was convinced that Marianne voted for Lindsay, including Lindsay. Lindsay and I even had a conversation. We were like, I don't even know why she's lying still, but whatever, it doesn't matter.
So one of the really clever things about your game, I feel like, is so you didn't have to cast a vote at this tribal council. You engineer everything that you laid out in even more detail than we knew from watching the show. That was it all just figured out of like that now I have plausible deniability of being able to let anybody think what they want to think, and I have like the perfect cover to continue to do and move and maneuver wherever I want to go.
Yeah, and I think I was like, the only reservation I had about doing what I did there was that it would put me out there very early on as a player. And
did it?
But that's the thing, it didn't. So I was like, great. Like the way this all played out, like everybody thinks it was their idea or that they were fully on board with it and it was fine. And I can like slip under the radar because I didn't have a vote and it didn't have anything. So the next round I was like, okay, I did like a lot there, but like I'm going to like now rein it back and just do whatever they want as long as it's not Taku, as long as it's not Hai, I don't care. That was my kind of place going into the next round of like I just did too much. And I luckily, like the way it went down, people don't know I did it. Right. And that's perfect. Because that was an intentional thing. Like I didn't want people to know, like the way I went about it, the way I did was so that nobody would know that I was doing it. And thankfully that worked for the time being.
And was that conscious? Because I thought that what was so exciting about your game was that I feel like that we've seen so many seasons in the last couple of years where somebody makes a big move and then they're the next person to go because everybody's like, okay, well, we can't let that person get to the end because that person, and ultimately that happens to you at the end. But you had a real run where that it seemed like that you were getting what you wanted. And also the other players in the game weren't looking at you as, okay, this is the next person we need to get out.
Yeah, that was my strategy because I didn't want to, and actually it was very nice that everybody, that you picked up on that throughout the season, because that was like you did see, especially watching Edge of Extinction, you see Kelly go out and then War Dog go out and then Ron go out and then, Victoria go out, and it's like those dominoes, it's like you put yourself out there and you get your head chopped off. So it's like, it was like, how can you do the same thing but not get caught doing it? And that was very much what I was trying to do. Even the round Drea went out, I tried to do that. Like, the reason that Lindsay didn't have the idol with her is because she was going into do or die. Like, I would have preferred if she had taken it over myself. But it just didn't work out that way because of the mechanics of the game. But yeah, that was the goal, is to kind of remain covert as long as possible.
Okay. So at this round, we have at the final 11. This is where Chanel goes home. But it does seem as though you're at the center of, like, now, like, the people on the bottom. You really realize, like, oh, the people on the bottom think I'm at the bottom, and they're telling me everything that they know. And you really sort of like this conduit of a lot of information that the other players are sharing with you.
Yeah, it was ideal because I kind of, like, even the vote before, like, I kind of knew what everybody was doing, because they were all sharing it with me, thankfully. But in the next round, I was like, I'm going to take more of a passive role, but as long as my people are safe. And then if they're safe, then I will just go with the flow on it, because it doesn't really matter. As long as it's someone from Ika or Tak or Vati going home, I don't care. And I was a little bit nervous about some of the attention I was getting at this point. I wanted to slip more under the radar. But even at the basketball challenge, where I almost won, people were like, oh my gosh, like, I'm so impressed with you, and, like, didn't expect that from you. And I was like, yeah, let's maybe not talk about it. Like, it's fine, because I just didn't want any sort of attention on me at that point. I was happy to have the attention go elsewhere. And then, with the whole rice thing, that was actually one of the only decisions in the game that was partially not game related for me, because like, part of it was like, okay, if you look at the final tribal council, which I know is jumping ahead, but, like, one of the historical things is, how did you provide for the tribe? And I was like, I have no skill sets at all to provide for the tribe.
Mm-hmm.
So this is the only way I can give them food. And then the other part was, I'd seen how much Drea was struggling with not being able to eat anything because she was allergic to coconut. And I really felt for her as a human kind of outside of the game at that point. So then the other part was like, well, she can also get rice. And she set out for peanut butter to give Marianne, and that was really kind. So, like, maybe I can return the favor in a weird way here.
What number person were you? Were you the fourth person to sit out in the rice negotiation?
Yeah, fourth. And I felt like all the alpha males were, like, looking at the women or the beta males to sit out, which is kind of annoying. But I was like, whatever. I'm truly the alpha, and you don't even know it. But yeah, that round was, at that point, she got a save execution, so the heat was really on her. And actually, that was also another affirming thing for me, that Chanel wasn't really with me, was that I was expecting to get a lot of heat from her potentially after the tribal council. And I was preparing what I was going to say to her the whole time, of like, I didn't know, like, Jonathan told me at tribal. And then as soon as we got back to camp, she pulled Hai aside to confront him on what was going on. So I was like, in that moment of that intense emotion, you're going to pull this person that you feel most betrayed by aside and talk to them. And clearly that's not me. So she really truly is still with her tribe that wants nothing to do with her. She's not with me. So that was more affirming of like, yeah, Chanel has to go. And then, but she was like pretty much the target the whole time. But then, Romeo really started to kind of pick up that he was on the outs. And at that moment in the game, I'm thinking like, a few steps ahead of like, who is going to be the biggest threat to me long term. And I think I wasn't threatened by Hai coming after me, but Hai had a lot of influence, I felt. So I was like, if Hai and Drea have Roxroy and Mike with them, like, I saw that as the biggest threat to my game, but we didn't have to like betray them at that point in time. And then this is also the round where Rockstar started talking about the men's alliance, which I think was shown in the episode after, but this is really where it started. And he was on his own planet. I was like, who is this guy? Like, no way am I going to do that, but like, I'll pretend to go along with it. And I think Mike and Jonathan were buying into that a little bit. And so this is really also where my relationship post-merge picked up with Lindsay, is I told her like, Mike and Jonathan are already thinking about this guy's alliance. Like, we need to like nip that in the butt now, and we'll be together. And actually, this is also where Lindsay told me about the amulet, which they showed it later in the show because she told Mike about it at the reward. But Lindsay told me about her amulet at the final 11. And interestingly enough, like 15 minutes later, Hai told me about the amulet as well. So at this point, I had that information too. And so people were just telling me stuff, and I wasn't syncing anybody's game because I was just keeping it to myself, because there was no reason to do that at that point. And I was trying to like really cultivate Romeo to be my guy. Like, Romeo, like we will get out some of the people around High, or even High himself if we need to, but like you need to like work with me here. But the problem with Romeo is he had a hard time trusting me telling him that, because he also thought I was at the bottom, I felt. Whereas I knew I wasn't at the bottom, but I couldn't tell him, this is how I know you're safe. And your number's not right now. And so that was kind of an interesting dynamic where I had to like pretend to not know more, but like really try to hint to him like, hey, you're literally fine. But he started like, and I think it's justified paranoia because he was on the outs, but it's like, what do you do with that information? Like, scrambling and panicking when you have that information doesn't really help. And it truly almost played him out of the game at that point, where High really wanted to just flip the whole vote because Chanel was remaining calm and doing what High said at that point, whereas Romeo wasn't. So Romeo, High wanted to flip the vote onto Romeo. And what happened was I came to him telling him, is actually, oh God, there's so much that comes back to me. So sorry. So Romeo
Don't
had
be
told
sorry.
me, yeah, Romeo had told me that Roxroy told him that his name was on the chopping block, which I
Yes.
think we saw on the show.
Yes.
And so interestingly, me going to High about that information had nothing to do with throwing Romeo under the bus. I wanted to start to sow seeds of discontent about Roxroy to High, because I was most threatened by if High and Drea were to pull in Mike and Roxroy and then use me as their fifth. Like, that doesn't set me up great in the long term. So I wanted to like break up High from Roxroy and kind of splinter that group from within, rather than making a big bold play at them. And so I wanted him to know, like, you can't trust Roxroy with some of this information because he's letting it leak. And that is true. Like, he shouldn't have told Romeo that. And so because of that, but then as a consequence of that, High wanted to get Romeo out, and he started to try to, get the ball rolling. And he said to me, I think you saw it on the show, I was like, I'm fine with whatever's chosen. I don't care. And I think I went back to him because then I was like, wait a second, like, Chanel knows enough about me to sync my game. So I went back to him and I was like, I mean, it might be too late to change things, but I'm going for my walk now, which is my interview. So just tell me what to do when I get back. And when I got back, everyone was like, and I think that's where a lot of the mic conversations were happening and why I wasn't in any of them, because I was off on a walk. When I came back, they're like, it's the same, it's Chanel. And it sounds so stupid because like, it's a split vote. Chanel's going home. You just throw a vote on Romeo. But I wanted to vote for Romeo in that moment because I felt still a personal bond with Chanel and I didn't want to write her name down, but I still had full knowledge she was going. So it's kind of, I guess, appeasing my own guilt to some extent, but that was my rationale.
Okay. So yeah, you were one of the 3 votes on Romeo there.
Yeah. And that was also good to, like, again, pretend to kind of be on the outs of like, oh, I didn't really have all the information, but like, even coming back, like, there were so many votes on Chanel that nobody asked me who I voted for. So, and if Romeo asked me, I would have just said I voted for Chanel. Like, nobody would really think twice about that. So it just never really came up. But the vote for High, that certainly sent things in a little bit of a tizzy. And actually, when Chanel went up, it didn't really show it, but she was kind of spicy on her way out. It was kind of, I was a little bit worried what she might say to me. So I just had this puppy dog look. And then she didn't say anything about me, which was thankful for.
Yeah.
But she said, like, Jonathan, you guys are dumb if you let Jonathan get to the end. And she said, if you heard anything about rabbits or soccer or potatoes, maybe you should think twice about people having something in their pocket. So, at that point, it really became public knowledge that everybody.
I bet Roxroy was like, wait, what?
Yeah, well, Roxroy and probably Tori too. Like, what the F?
Yeah, interesting. I wonder why we didn't get to see that. I wonder if it's because then because there were so many other exits that, where Jeff really commented on, like, wow, this group is, incredible. And I feel like that maybe that doesn't fit in with that narrative.
Yeah. And I don't think it had like a tremendous amount of weight to the rest of the game, except for, I think there was this general notion of we have to get Jonathan out before the end because the jury's telling us to do that. But as far as like the idols, like, everybody pretty much knew about it. So it wasn't that crazy.
But Omar, that's so interesting because it felt like on the outside that people who were watching the show, like, no, take Jonathan to the end. Did the perception of him change, or did we have it wrong on the outside?
No, I think that the perception definitely changed as the game went on. And I think for me, I kind of sensed that change in perception, but the other side of things was difficult. And I think, Jonathan's a big guy. and he is used to eating a lot. You know,
Yeah.
18 eggs, one emu egg potentially, 9 pieces of cheese, et
Grits.
cetera, et cetera.
Yeah.
And I think when you don't have that, it becomes very difficult to like function normally.
Got
And,
it.
you know, people get hangry, you know, and I fortunately actually did not ever feel hangry because I was very used to fasting, and I also have more reserves. But as fasting for Ramadan, like really, you know how you function when you're starving. So for me, it wasn't that big of a deal, but other people can get hangry. And so, you know, that's how that played out. I think for me too, like thinking back on the history of the show, someone like Jonathan is always seen as the person that's unbeatable. And so I think that perception of the history of the show hurt me a little bit because I didn't stick to my instinct of, oh no, maybe he would be good to go to the end against, because I was focused on the history of the show as opposed to what was happening now.
Do you think that in the future that people are not going to have that mentality of like, okay, if you let this person get to the end, like I almost can see a future where in the next couple of years, the Jonathans go to the end more because
Right.
people are not as afraid of like, oh, if they get to the end, they'll win.
Yeah, I think it really comes honestly down to more of a socials game, honestly. I think, you know, going into the game, I thought, oh, strategy is the most important. But, you know, coming out of the game, I feel like the social aspect is more
Mm-hmm.
important because you can't do anything if you don't have any social
Right.
relationships. And I think that, you know, if you have someone like Jonathan that has like a top-notch social game, if they still get to the end, they're going to beat everybody. And I
Right.
think whoever has the best social game will generally win. So I think that that's what people should maybe look out for more.
Yes.
Um, and just
I
kind of like each season is a microcosm as opposed to looking at the overall.
Well, and I agree with what you're saying about the social game being the most important. And I think that's also a byproduct of them casting more and more super fans on the show. Like
Mhm.
even the person who is like the least big super fan, which I'm sure Stephen Fishback is rolling in his grave grammatically to hear me say that. But like, you know, who's the least biggest super fan of the season? Like maybe like a Roxroy, maybe.
Right.
Like okay, so he's like, okay, I'm very impressed with Jonathan when he gets to the end, but I feel
Yeah.
like that everybody else, I almost feel like is like, okay, well, okay, if you want immunity challenges, it's like a big freaking deal.
Yeah. And I really think it comes down to your daily interactions and who is annoyed and who's not annoyed with you more so than anything else, because you can justify anything at your final vote, honestly. It's just a matter, I really think that the social game is like the most important.
Okay. Just a couple other questions from that round with the final 11.
Mhm.
Any suspicion that Drea had gotten a power when she was sitting on the sit out bench?
For me, I didn't really like, you know, you obviously think about it like the Sarah Lucina situation, but it didn't
Right.
really like, I didn't really dwell on it, to be honest, for myself. And I think most people didn't. I think a lot of people asked me, what were you surprised seeing back on the show? And, you know, everybody talks after to some extent. So most things did not surprise me, but I would say the one thing that really did surprise me was Tori spotting the red paint.
Yeah.
Because I didn't know that happened. She never told me about that. I never found that out of Ponderosa or anything like that. So watching that back was kind of crazy and very astute, and like amazing job for Tori. Like Tori's so observant that that's amazing that that happened. But I didn't really have any clue about that. It was actually very devastating to lose the food. Like I know that doesn't really translate on TV because you're like so hungry. And I know it's only 26 days, but like in the moment, it felt like we hadn't really been eating very much. And so to lose that peanut butter and jelly by one basket was kind of crappy. But getting the rice really like recharged everything for me, and I think for other people as well. Although on the flip side of that, maybe it was better to not do the rice because I feel like I was functioning better than most people that were starving, even though I was still having a hard time. Um, but yeah, almost flipped onto Romeo, just through you know, really trying to actively stop it, which is like almost like a self-fulfilling prophecy in some ways.
If you had wanted it to be Romeo, could you have switched it?
Um, that's hard to say because Mike was pretty gung ho on getting Chanel out. And
Yeah.
I think for me, there was no reason to want Romeo out over Chanel because
Okay.
Romeo was still working with me pretty closely, and Chanel was clearly working with Vati more than me. So in that sense, like I didn't see any reason to flip that at all, and actually didn't really want it to flip in that sense. But I did want Romeo to just like chill. So this is the point in the game where I started to actually flip from using Romeo to wanting to use Tori more, because there was a point where Romeo, Tori, and I were at the well, and she had just won immunity, and Romeo's like, you need to go looking for an idol. You need to go do this. You need to go do that. And Tori was like, and then and I was like, I don't think that we should like make a scene here. And then Romeo walked away, and I was like to Tori, you should not do that stuff. Like what you're doing right now is working, because people started to forget about her a little bit, and she was fading into the background. And I had a good enough relationship with her where she became kind of my new Romeo, in a sense of like, okay, Romeo may be a little bit less reliable here, but Tori will work with me and do what I tell her to do.
You know, it's interesting because in the next upcoming episode, we're going to have the 5-5 split where Romeo is supposed to go home. You know, Tori is not the main target to go home. That I feel like that in another dimension in the multiverse, that I think that, you know, somehow Tori survives that night, draws a different rock. And Romeo doesn't. And I think Tori's in the final 3.
Oh yeah, I could definitely see that. Like she got really unlucky with that. She was doing a really good job kind of playing from the bottom in that sense, but she didn't have a lot of traction because her reputation had been destroyed. So it was like she was slowly starting to get it back. And then she just kind of went out at the like wrong place, wrong time kind of thing. Do you have any advertisements that you want to give as a little interlude?
Yeah. Okay. So we are heading into the final 10. Why don't we, you know, thank you for being so generous to the sponsors. They appreciate that. So let's take a moment and hear from them. And then when we come back, Omar will tell us about the night that Roxroy ended up going home.
When he went back to his home planet.
He went back home. Okay. We'll be right back after this. All right, we are back here to talk some more with the great Omar Zaheer. Omar, you have any more Diet Pepsi?
I'm still here, and I still got my white mocha, which you don't even know what it is, which means you're trash.
I do know what it is because we talked. I think that people will find this interesting, that you are a huge Diet Pepsi guy.
Yeah. Like it literally is my crack cocaine, my alcohol, everything. I feel visceral like need for it if I don't have it, and it's the only righteous drink in my opinion. Actually, I think I told you that my parents would give me Coke in a bottle as a kid, so that's probably why I'm so addicted, and maybe why they didn't make the best decisions.
But it was Coke or it was Diet Pepsi?
It was Coke, but I mean, you can't feed a baby aspartame like that. But I eventually developed a taste for the diet over the regular, which is trash.
And okay, and you made the switch from Coke to Pepsi.
Yeah, like Coke sucks.
Wow. Okay. So some controversial fighting words from Omar. Okay. All right. So let's talk a little bit about when they went from 10 to 5. And were you anticipating that this could happen?
So yes and no. Like we weren't sure exactly what was going to happen. If we tried to play the metagame a little bit, part of me was like, I don't know if they're going to do that, because if they did split it and do a double boot now, then they're only going to get 13 episodes instead of 14. And it's like, do they really want to cut an episode out of the season?
Who are you having these conversations with?
Myself.
In your head, yeah.
My head. But then on the other hand, like maybe it's a shortened season, maybe there'll be less episodes. Like I don't really know what the plan was. So kind of that morning, what happened is I went for I actually slept so well at night, probably better than anyone else. Eventually, like I know Tony did a lot of strategizing in his sleep. I didn't, because I literally slept the whole night, like 12 hours out. And then I would wake up and be so refreshed. And I would do more of my strategizing on lockdowns and in the boat and stuff like that. But what I would say is that I went to the confessional that morning and I was trying to play out the scenarios. And I think I said, like, Romeo has really played himself into a hole here. And I have to invest a lot of social capital at this point to save him, because he and Hai also had that blowout the night before. And this is also where I was a little bit starting to kind of feel that, you know, maybe Hai was a little bit like less predictable because I didn't expect him to react that way to the vote. And, you know, hearing his explanation, I understood a bit more why he did that. But also and he asked me, was that too much? And I was like, I think it was a bit too much because, you know, Romeo's already on the outs. Like he got 3 votes on a split. It's not like he's in the best position ever. But it's like Romeo had kind of, and they actually didn't show it, but Roxroy also got into it with Romeo a little bit that night. Because Romeo was trying to get Roxroy to back him up, and Roxroy's like, "I'm doing the fire," and that's it. And Marianne, I think they showed a little clip of it, but Marianne and I were like, "What the hell's going on here?" We were like loving the drama. It was a little bit uncomfortable though. But then I said in the confessional, I was like, I want to keep Romeo around, but like he's dug himself such a hole here that there's no way to save him, and he's going home. But if I had to handpick anybody here to leave the game, it would be Roxroy, because I feel like he is the person that's the least workable for me, because he's a straightforward guy. But the problem with Roxroy's game was that the people he was loyal to, like I wasn't number 1, 2, 3, or 4 on that list. So it's like you're very rigid in your gameplay, but you don't have my best interest at heart long term. So it's like that wasn't going to work for me. And what he had tried to do was pull together a guys alliance that excluded Romeo but included Drea. And he had said to me in the conversation, like, I want to include Drea in this alliance for reasons that I can't talk to you about, but you'll see when they reveal themselves, basically. So in that conversation, I thought he was talking about her extra vote or her immunity idol. I didn't know he was talking about like their personal bond. So, you know, that came into kind of play into how we played the rest of that round, which is a lesson of like, oh, you know, sometimes I do fill in the gaps when I hear something, because that's kind of what made sense. Like it sounded like something tangible that would come out. And so it sounded like he was talking about one of her advantages, which I knew about, except for the knowledge is power. So then I said, like, I would love Roxroy to go. I just don't see if there's a way to do it at this point. And I was very worried because Mike and Roxroy were getting kind of close, and then Dre and Hai were close. And I thought that they would want that to be the final 5 with me. And I was like, that's not good. That's not a good option for me. So I think I spoke to Lindsay and Marianne that morning, and I said, we don't know what's going to happen with this immunity challenge. But if we get split up into groups and we're not together, our priority needs to be to take out either Roxroy, Mike, Hai, or Drea, like one of those. If there's a way to get them out, we should get them out. And in that moment, I was not going to let Hai go myself, but I was like, if he's on a different tribe and they vote him out, like I have nothing to do with that, and that's fine because that'll be better for our game long term. But I wasn't ready to turn on him or even Drea at that point for my game. But I was like, if they can get Mike or Roxroy out, like do it. And then when I got back, it was almost like a Christmas present had unveiled itself, because Roxroy talked to me and he said, because the plan at that point was we'll split Romeo and Tori if we were all one group, with most votes going on Romeo. And I was like, great, I want to keep Tori anyways. And then Roxroy came up. He's like, yo, we got to get the idols out. What are we doing? Like, we got to vote out Marianne and split between Marianne and Romeo, and send Marianne home. And he's like, wouldn't you just want to flush an idol? And I was like, yeah, I guess, yeah, that's true. We should do that. And then I talked to Hai. And by this time, Hai had kind of come around to Marianne, because after the emotional Rice thing, they really like got closer and he wanted to work with her. Yeah. He started. And so Hai went from wanting to like flush out Marianne's idol to wanting to keep her idol safe to get out Jonathan at 9 or 8. And we would get Marianne to play her idol, send Jonathan out the door. And I was like, okay, great. Now I can go from like covertly telling her to keep her idol to like overtly doing it, because we're all on the same page. And so at that point, I got on the beach with Hai, and they showed this conversation on the show, but made it look like it was after the immunity challenge. But I'm in a different shirt, like my flamingo one. And we're talking on the beach, and he said, like, I just had a conversation with Roxroy and I didn't like the way it went, because Roxroy had the same conversation with him as he had with me about getting Marianne out. Mm-hmm. And he's like, I just don't know if we can do that because Mike will be really mad. And I said, you know, if you want to make this move and do this, like, I will be with you to do it, because I'm thinking like, great, like Roxroy is who I wanted out anyways. Like, this is perfect. And now I can do it, splinter that group I'm afraid of without having to go against it, but rather fracture from within. And I said, like, we have 2 options now. We can either go with Roxroy's plan, but then secretly change a few votes so that Romeo goes instead of Marianne, or we could just blindside Roxroy. And I said, the way we can do that is it could be me, you, Marianne, Drea and Drea's extra vote. Because I wanted Drea to burn one of her advantages and like use her extra vote at that time. And he's like, yes, let's do that. Because everybody else would be splitting between Tori and Romeo if we stayed as a group of 10. So he went to go pull aside Marianne and bring her into the plan. And I went to go pull aside Drea to pull her into the plan. And I told Drea in that moment, like, Roxroy's starting this men's alliance. He wants you in it, but then like you're kind of the last one in. And he is telling me, like, implying that once your advantage comes out, we don't need you anymore. And she and I fist bumped on that plan. So going into the immunity challenge, the plan was already Roxroy. And the four of us were in on that plan. Mike still didn't know about it. And I think I told Lindsay and Jonathan, or no, I think I told Lindsay. I can't remember if I told Jonathan too, but I was like, we're working on getting Roxroy out, but we might have to blindside you with it and make that move separate from you, but like you'll know about it kind of thing. And so then we went to the immunity challenge and we got split into groups. And I was like, this is the craziest split because Roxroy wanted a final 5 of guys. And then now it's him and Romeo and then us. Like, this is crazy that worked out that way. And then Jonathan and the girls. And again, I'm like, fuck, like, oh, sorry. Jonathan, Fudge. Jonathan is again on the other tribe, Shiz. And I'm not going to get to eat again. Like, I'm so sad about it. And I was out in 2 seconds in that challenge. Most people were because it was so turbulent. Yeah. I think they told us that the lowest amount of time that challenge went before this season was 17 minutes. And it was only 4 minutes total for ours. Like, it was crazy. But they won their kebabs and whatever. And then, you know, looking at this group, I'm like, this is perfect because Mike and Roxroy are going to vote for Romeo. And then Romeo is up for grabs because he has nowhere to go. And Hai and I already want to vote out Roxroy. So I was like, it's done. Like, Roxroy's going to go home in this configuration. When we got back to the Taku tribe, it was actually the craziest day of waves. It took forever to get on to shore because it was just so unsafe. Well, no, like it was safe, but like it was just like they had to wait for the right moment to let us off the boat, basically. And we got there, and Hai just takes off. He's like off and gone, and we don't know where he went. He probably went to go look to see if there's any advantages or something on the island. But the rest of us kind of like that's when you saw Mike and Roxroy kind of go off.
He was seasick.
No, I think he was looking for something. But he and Mike and Roxroy went to go talk, and that's when Romeo and I had our conversation. And I said, Romeo, look, like, Hai will vote out Roxroy with us, but you need to just remain calm because if you freak out, like, this is going to be a problem. Yeah. And that was the first time he really like got it. And he actually did like stay chill for the rest of the day. It was amazing. Yeah.
That's interesting that you went to Romeo first and not to Hai first.
But it was already done. Like I already knew that Roxroy was going to be on board, or sorry, Hai was going to be on board because that was the plan to begin with. So it just seemed like, even though we didn't verbalize it once we split, it was understood almost. And then I could always be like, oh, well, if he changes his mind, we'll go a different way. But I thought he was going to leave Mike out of the plan, actually. But he decided to include Mike in on the plan. But this is actually the first time that my name came up the whole game, but it was a decoy. So I remember I was a little frustrated with Romeo, even though I loved him, because he was like, I was like, what do you want? We're talking right now, but we need to like give them a story of what we talked about. So what should I tell them that you want to do? And he's like, don't tell them I gave a name. And I'm like, but they're going to like expect that you were throwing somebody under the bus. And he's like, no, like, you can't tell them I said anybody. And I was like, okay, like, this is going to be a hard sell, and it's not going to be a blindside if we don't have a proper plan. But then I went to Roxroy and Mike, and I was like, Romeo's freaking out. He thinks he's going home. But what are we going to tell him? And then Roxroy was like, I'm going to tell him it's you. And I was like, interesting. And that was his fake plan. But I was like, I don't even want to be your fake plan. Like, you're gone. But then
I'm going to tell them it's you is like famous Survivor last words.
Yeah. I was like, sorry, Roxroy. Like, if I didn't have a reason before, now I do. But then Hai kind of went to work. He pulled Romeo aside, pulled Romeo in on the plan. And then he pulled Mike aside and pulled Mike in on the plan. And then we were all kind of on fake lockdown of like Roxroy wanted to just keep it chill. So we were all just sitting around
the Boston Rob plan.
The Boston Rob plan. And I was like, this is ironic because he's stealing his own fate. Romeo didn't really want to vote out Roxroy. So there was a brief moment where I entertained the idea of what if Romeo and I vote for Mike, and then Hai is voting for Roxroy, and Mike is voting for Roxroy, and Roxroy is voting for Romeo. So then on the revote, we could vote up Mike 2-1, and then I could tell Hai that Mike was really not in on the plan, and he was pissed about it.
Mhm.
But I was like, if you're going to make a move on that alliance, you can't really go peripherally. You have to go for the top. So we didn't end up doing that. But so Hai pulled Mike aside, and then Mike and I had this really weird conversation on the way back to the camp where he's like, "Are we good for the plan?" And I was like, "Yeah." And he's like, "What is the plan?" And I was like, I didn't know that he knew at this point. So I was like, "Romeo?" And he was like, "Okay." But then he came back to me a minute. He was like, "But do you know the plan?" It was like really weird because that's why him and I were not really strategically talking. It was more through Hai. We were just friends at that point. So then we came to the conclusion that, yes, we are talking about the plan to blindside Roxroy. We're on board for that. And he asked me, he's like, I don't want to do this if Drea is not on board with this, because he was still
Mikey no likey.
Mikey no likey. He did not likey the plan because he didn't want to blindside Drea because that was the other side of our alliance.
Mhm.
And so I told him that Drea wasn't on the plan because we had made that plan before the immunity challenge. And he's like, I didn't know. And Hai had told him the same thing. And he's like, I didn't know if Hai was lying to me about Drea knowing. And I was like, no, he's not. Like, she did know. She's in on the plan. We're fine. And so he's like, okay, but I'm uneasy about this. And so I was like, is he going to do something crazy, like give Roxroy his immunity idol or something? And I remember being very confused because Mike was very adamant that he like couldn't break his word to Roxroy. But I was like, this is such an arbitrary like line for me. Like, I didn't understand where he was coming from, but I understood that it was important to him. So I was like, okay, sure. And then it was just a blindside.
Yeah. Very, very clean, straightforward vote on your side of things. Are you thinking a move ahead at this point where you are now thinking about like, okay, there's some friction here between Hai and Mike over this, and now we'll use this as a wedge in the next round?
Yes. And so, there was a little friction there, but it really came to light after the immunity challenge, after the tribal council, when we got back into the shelter. And you saw a little clip of this on the show where he was like, I felt really like pushed into that. And they didn't show me saying it, but I was like, I didn't, but I'm really sorry that you did, because that's not okay. And in that moment, I felt like I had tried to tell Mike enough times that Hai really, like Drea really did tell Hai that she was in on the plan, but it was clear to me kind of in that moment that he didn't really want to believe that. Like, he had his mind made up kind of thing. So I was like, okay, this is actually perfect, because now within that group that I was worried about, these two are feuding and Hai doesn't even know it. And Hai has a lot of power. And so this could be the opportunity to take out Hai. And I think this is probably the biggest move of the game, the Hai vote out, where I got too much credit on the show for it. Like, I think they had to tell a succinct story, which makes sense. But like, the thing is, Mike wanted Hai out before I said anything to him. And that really came about when Drea told him that she didn't know about the Roxroy blindside and had lied to him about that, because Mike felt so betrayed by that. And that being said, Mike still was focused on Hai, because I also told him that he wasn't mad at me, but he was focused in on Hai. And Drea also independently turned on Hai, although I don't think she hasn't had as much agency with the whole group. But it's like all these people kind of came in on him at the same time. And I think they gave me the credit, but like, it could have gone to Mike just as easily from my perspective.
That's very interesting. Because Mike talked about a lot in the episode about how he like made the big move to vote out Hai, and we really saw where that Mike wasn't really thinking too much about Hai until you told him the quote unquote good lie, not a stupid lie. That was like the best TV moment of that, and so you can understand why the producers are going to lean into that.
Oh yeah, for sure. And I don't think it's an inaccurate storyline necessarily. It's just there's other parts where other people could get credit for it too. I don't think any vote on Survivor is ever as straightforward as this person did this, or this person is solely responsible for everybody's move here. And so I think that it was kind of a collaboration, but that was like a very spicy moment. So it's like good to it's very succinct, I would say, because even the lie that I was talking about wasn't even the one that they really showed. So kind of at Pizza Under the Stars, What I was unsure about is what Hai had promised Mike. I was like, did Mike promise? Because in Hai's mind, he wanted the final three to be him, Drea, and I. And then Mike was number 4. And then Marianne had kind of been brought in as number 5. But Hai just told me about that instead of collaborating. So that's really also the moment where I was like, I think Hai, if I go to the end with him, I don't have a reason to win because he is now dictating strategy. And then we're just going to go along with the plan and not really have a discussion or anything like that. And maybe that was short-sighted for me because I did have influence on him at times that maybe he didn't come across as overtly, but it just felt like in that moment he had his plan and he was executing the plans without talking or collaborating. And so it felt less safe to go to the end with him when I had been more in control of Taku, I would say. And so I also was very loyal to Taku, so it was very hard for me to fully flip on them to go to Hai. I felt like that would have been the bigger move. But I wanted to keep Hai and Taku in as long as I could. And I felt like this was really the tipping point where I couldn't keep them both in the game anymore because Hai was going after Jonathan, Jonathan was going after Hai, and I had to choose a side. In terms of the Pizza Under the Stars reward, I wasn't sure. I went into that reward wanting to turn Mike against Hai, but Mike also went into that reward wanting to turn me against Hai. So we both had the same intention, but I wasn't sure what Hai had promised Mike. I was like, did he promise him final 3 or final 4? If he promised him final 4, then technically he didn't really lie to him. So the good lie that I was talking about was like, I think Mike or Hai mentioned something about how we have to get you out at 5 or 6 because something about soccer. And I was like trying to get Mike to admit to me that he had an idol because at that point he's still pretending he didn't have one, and he wouldn't admit it. So I was like, I don't trust Mike, even though we just formed this final 3 alliance with Lindsay, him, and I, because he's not telling me something that is so obviously I should know already. And he didn't feel comfortable doing that. And then later in the night, he did reveal that he had an idol, but he said that I didn't tell you because I promised Stacy I would never reveal that to anyone, which is his now wife. And at the moment, I also was like, this is sketchy because I know you told Hai. I know you told Daniel. I know you told Chanel. So like the fact that you're pretending you didn't is like kind of weird to me. And that's when Lindsay revealed her amulet as well as kind of like a bonding moment of their advantages. But I did not want to reveal my nullifier. But I think this was the moment where I was like, I could get Mike or Hai out. It just seems like the cleaner cut to get to Hai out. And I have something that will get rid of Mike later. And so it was like it just seemed very straightforward. Like if I could control, and Lindsay had a good relationship with Mike, they're both Jersey. So it was like, okay, well, we can kind of string him along and then get him out later. But I never fully trusted him because I felt like he was withholding some stuff. But then part of me also wanted to trust him because he's all like, I'm honorable, I'm integrity, all of that. So it was conflicting emotions, I would say.
Was there a path to get rid of Mike on this round?
I think there was if I had told Hai basically what Mike was doing, but then it would have been less clean. So at this point, I was like trying to get people out. And I think, I wanted to save Marianne's idol, Marianne's advantage, my idol nullifier, because I thought there was going to be a war on Taku earlier than there was. So I was like, we could use these trinkets when people least suspect to gain the majority, because at some point people will realize that we're all still in the game and it's a little bit too suspicious, but they didn't really ever get there. So then it was a matter of like just cutting people out and causing the least waves. And at that point, to get Mike out would have caused some waves with Jonathan, would have caused some waves with Lindsay. And it just seemed like a lot more of a risky move to do than to cut out Hai and then have the thing that will get rid of Mike later.
Yeah. It makes all the sense in the world. I remember at the time that I was thinking like, boy, I love what Omar is doing here, but I wonder if that maybe getting out Mike here, if that was on the table, was a better way to go, because I felt like that Mike is the bridge to Jonathan. Like, I feel like that if you took Mike out of there, Jonathan has no other options. He has nowhere to go. Whereas like taking Hai out, then, there still is like the Mike connection to working with Jonathan.
Yeah, definitely. And that was something that, was a consideration, but and in hindsight, maybe that is the better move. It's just, it was hard to kind of commit to that when I knew how much it would take to flip it. And then also Jonathan or Mike had made a final 3 alliance with Lindsay and I, and we had talked about how we would go Hai, Jonathan, and then Drea as the order to go in. And so I was like, okay, well, at least we'll see early on enough if he's really true to that. because there will come a time to vote out Jonathan, and will he do it or not? And ultimately, he didn't want to when the time was there. But.
I mean, going back to Marianne's Jenga game, high is a block that's like up near the top. You could get that very easily, where Mike is one that's like kind of in the middle, like the whole tower might end up falling over.
Yeah, exactly. And I think, hindsight's always 20. You always have to consider what you could have done differently. And there's so many things that I could consider. It's also hard because I had so many options that like there could be something that went right or wrong with any one of them. And at that point in the game, really for me, it was listening to the Queen's Bradland of like, just keep as many options as you can in the game. And I felt like I had that, and my game didn't fall apart till later.
Yeah. So in that episode, that it was like such a foregone conclusion that High was going to go home. You're sitting there with like 10 minutes left in the episode, and you're talking about like, boy, this is too easy. Maybe I should change it. Maybe I should save High.
Yeah, I think to back that up too a little bit, like there was no blowback at all for me going on that reward. I was really worried about that, but I really didn't have anything to eat. And, Romeo didn't either, which I thought it was like a weird choice that she didn't choose him at the time.
Yeah.
Strategically, it ended up maybe in hindsight, it would have been better to take Romeo, but in the moment, Mike felt like the right strategic choice. But I was surprised that there was no blowback, and Romeo is kind of the bottom of the pecking order. So people like were easily discarding him in some ways. But Lindsay, this is really also like Lindsay and I were getting very close, and we were working together very well. And between her and Marianne and I, like this is still the point in the game where Marianne's kind of on the outs, and I was doing the check-in with her. And I think the pro of the check-in is like you can maintain a relationship with trust that nobody knows about. But then on the back end of that, like if you're not spending a lot of time together, then maybe your trust can splinter a little bit. So I was spending a lot of time with High, for instance, to make him feel comfortable, but then he's gone, and who do you have left? So there's pros and cons to that strategy, I guess. But with after the immunity challenge, part of my thought was like going into it, we were going to blindside like Taku and Mike. We're going to blindside High, and then I find out when I get back from the reward challenge, I got into the shelter with Drea, and she said, who's playing a too good of a game, right? And I said, yeah. And then she's like, High. And I was like, I know. And then she's like, he has to go. And I was like, I know. And so then I'm like, oh, wait, like Drea's now in on the plan when she shouldn't be in on the plan, So I was like, okay, so High doesn't have as much agency at this point in the game that I thought he did, or as much power. So if High's really loyal to me and wants to go to the end with me, then is it smart to vote him out? But I think at that point, there was way too much. It was like undoing a tsunami kind of thing. Like it would have taken way too much political, social capital to change the tide at that point, that it wasn't worth it. But obviously when they ask you, like, what's the pro of keeping High, you have to give them a reason. But I didn't actively make any moves at camp to do that.
Yeah. We kind of yada the pizza under the stars, and didn't talk at all about the videos you got of your family from. How did that ultimately change your mindset at all, if it did?
I think that it was interesting because, first of all, pizza is the thing I wanted the whole time, so I was super excited about it. And since we've been talking about the bathroom so much, like Mike and Lindsay went for the hills after that. And I sat there, and I was like, I don't want to go at night. So I literally just sat there like this the whole night until morning when I could go in the ocean successfully. But in that moment, it was very emotional to get the loved ones visit and all of that. And like, it really, it really supercharged a bond, I would say, kind of like with Jackson leaving supercharged Taku. Mike, Lindsay, and I bonded a lot in that moment, and you kind of want to believe them and you want to be loyal to them, even if there's some red flags about the story Mike's telling you. Part of you still wants to believe that is true. And I think for him, part of I think he was being truthful to that alliance to some extent. But it does show that emotional moments like that can really bond people. And then not having anybody at camp know about that didn't bond them against us. Whereas if they maybe knew that we were having a loved one's visit, it would have done that. And none of us told any of them.
Oh, interesting. Yeah. I feel like that wasn't part of the show.
Yeah, none of us, we all agreed not to say anything. And then unlike other secrets in the show, nobody actually said anything. So people only found out once they got to Ponderosa or after the game.
Yeah. And was it at all like creepy to have like the voices playing from behind?
Yes,
Like,
I thought it
yeah,
was like I thought it was a production error or something, or like some static noise because it was so loud and it wasn't
yeah.
very clear. And then when we heard "We Miss You," then we're like, oh yeah, this is the moment. And I love a good horror movie, so I was down for it, even if it meant I was going to get sliced in half.
Yeah. Okay.
Uh,
All right. Speaking of horror movies, should we talk about the Do or Die?
oh yeah, yeah, yeah. So I guess yeah. So high left, and then I don't know. Do you want to talk about the Do or Die or the stuff that happened before Do or Die
Please,
first?
please tell me what happened before Do or
Okay.
Die.
So, oh my gosh, I'm so sorry. I think I need to go to Coconut Grove again. It's these
Okay,
I'll
no
be
problem. All right.
20
So,
seconds.
all right, we'll take a quick break. And when we come back, Do or Die right after this.
This short break.
This is a very short break. Okay,
Okay,
we are back.
we're good.
And we're about to hear what happened right before Do
The
or
do or
Die.
die. So the final seven was, I would say, actually the craziest round of gameplay that I have seen, and that was all honestly even before the do or die. So basically, everybody was running around with a chicken, like a chicken with their head cut off. The target was a revolving door between Jonathan, Mike, and Drea. Like Jonathan, Mike, Drea, Jonathan, Mike, Drea, Jonathan, Mike, Drea. Like it wouldn't stop. And for me, I was like, I don't want to reveal anything about what I want to do because everybody was coming to me with what they wanted to do. But I was like, well, we haven't even had an immunity challenge yet. Any of these
Right.
people could win that challenge. And so
And
why are
just
we?
to just reset this, this is when, we see that Mike is saying like, hey, this is the five.
Yeah,
Dre,
yeah,
let's just vote out Romeo. This is
yeah.
too easy.
Yeah, exactly, exactly. And so, that happened late in the day that day. So even before that, there was so much chaos that they didn't really show. But basically, the target had been a revolving door around those three. What happened? First thing we got up that morning, Lindsay, Mike, and I go to the water well, and they called me over, and I was like, "This is a mistake because we just went on that reward, and now you're calling me over for this meeting. Like it's so obvious." But I had to be a part of that. I think this is where the game started to unravel a little bit between Jonathan or Lindsay and Mike a little bit because Lindsay really wanted Jonathan out and Mike really wanted Drea out. And I'm like, it was supposed to be Jonathan's turn, but now when it's time for that, Mike doesn't want to do that anymore. And so that's really when I think I said in the confessional, I don't trust anything that Mike says anymore. It was because of that. Like when it came time to vote out Jonathan, he didn't want to do it anymore. And so but I could tell they were like butting heads because Mike wants it his way and Lindsay wants it her way, and I'm like again trying to be the peacekeeper of like, oh, I see it both ways, but like we have so much time, let's just like think about it and then reconvene later and we can decide what to do. In my mind, like I kind of agreed with Lindsay because I felt like there may be so few opportunities to get Jonathan out in the game that maybe we should just take out somebody who's going to take up the immunity challenges and we would have to rely on him to take us when we don't know for sure if he's going to do that. But what changed that opinion a little bit is I went for a walk with Jonathan right after that, and him, Mike, and I were there, and we split up from Mike, and Mike went into the woods, and I said, Jonathan, I'm really worried that Mike will find another immunity idol and have two. And he's like, I know. And I said, what do you think he's doing right now? Because he just went off into the woods. And he's like, well, he's finding an idol again. And then he'll have two. And at this point, he and I know about the nullifier. So we know we can get rid of one idol, but if he has two, that's a problem. And then Jonathan's like, I don't know what we should do about this. And I was like, well, what do you think we should do? Like, should we just let him coast or get him out? And then he's like, I think we should get Mike out now. And then that was really the moment where I was like, okay. I think also I had that little like Jerry face of like, after I talked with Jonathan about that, because I felt like I like kind of guided him into that, but he was also threatened by Mike too.
When you say you had a Jerry face,
like Jerry the Mouse, Jerome Mouse, like with his little like sly face,
okay,
like up to no good. But Jonathan basically wanted Mike out at that point of the game, and I do think that was real because Mike didn't know about that happening. So that's really the moment where I was like, okay, so Mike and Jonathan are not really as tight as I thought they were. And now we can maybe use Jonathan to vote out Mike, or I can tell Mike that Jonathan wants him out and use Mike to get Jonathan out. So I didn't even tell Mike in that moment, because I just filed that in the back of my head, because at this point I don't know what I want to do yet. So it's like, if I decide to get Mike out, or Jonathan out, all I need to tell is Mike, like, he wants to blindside you tonight, or vice versa. But I didn't know who's going to win the immunity challenge, so I just kept my mouth shut. And then I thought, okay, this is all settled. Like, Mike, Lindsay, and I will figure out what to do between Drea and Jonathan. Jonathan wants to vote out Mike, so we have that opportunity to do that if we want to. And then Romeo, Marianne, and I formed a new alliance called the Underbirdies at that point, and we were considering going to the end together. So I was like, I'm really set up pretty well here. And in the midst of this, Drea and I are also talking, but it was really hard to get any sort of plan out of her in terms of what she wanted long term. Like, she would kind of say, oh, we'll like go far together, but like there was never any definitive plan, and she would only kind of reveal one part of the plan at a time. So whereas everybody else is giving me full plans of what to do, she wasn't. So I didn't feel super easy about that. Plus, you could also see that the jury reaction to her was very positive. And you could tell kind of at tribal council, it was almost like she was somewhat playing to them at the round high went out. So it was like, she's like very favorably seen in the eyes of the jury. And so if we let her get there, we will lose the game. So, I had that in the back of my mind. Like, Dre is the jury threat, Jonathan's the challenge threat, and Mike is, he has an idol and all of that. So he has advantages. So I was like, these three need to go next. So then chaos started to happen, because Drea had told Lindsay had a conversation with Drea about getting Jonathan out, and how Mike wasn't maybe on board with that or something like that. Like, I don't know the details of the conversation, but basically whatever happened with Lindsay and Drea took that to Mike and basically said, I trust Lindsay and I don't trust you. And then Mike came to me and he was like, we can't trust Lindsay anymore. She's telling Drea that we're going after her. And I'm like, this is a mess, because I know what happens when Mike feels betrayed by someone. Like, he's going to get Lindsay out, and this is a problem. So at that point, what I did was try to do damage control on all sides for Lindsay. So I went to Mike, said, you need to go tell Lindsay a fake story about how you want me out, and to see if Lindsay will come back to me and tell me that. So I take Lindsay to the water well, and I said, you're being tested right now, but I have the answer sheet. Here you go. Like, I am here to target Mike. You talked me out of it. You go tell Mike that I was targeting him, but you talked me out of it. So she does that, repairs their relationship. Then I go to Drea, and Drea says, we need to get out Mike. And if he wins immunity, we get out Lindsay. And I was like, okay, why do you want Lindsay over Jonathan? And then she said, because Lindsay trusts Mike too much, and she won't vote him out. So then I go to Lindsay and I say, you need to go to Drea and tell her you'll vote Mike out, because she will trust you more if you do that. So then she goes to Drea, tells her that, and then now Drea is back on board with Lindsay, back on board, and both of them are back on board with Lindsay.
Yes. And are you brokering all this information without any detection?
I think at this point, yes. I don't think my game fell apart till later, but I'm basically like, sometimes I would use information like against Lydia, obviously. But then other times I would try to use information to like repair relationships, because they were important to be repaired in the moment.
Mm-hmm.
And so at this point, I'm trying to
use your powers for good and evil.
Good and evil. But at this point, I was like very much like, I need to keep everything as calm as possible. Like, I don't want to let any sort of train go derailing. And so I need to keep as much peace with certain people as possible, and let one of these three get out and figure that out later. So at this point, then Lindsay's out on Drea, because Drea gave up information about her. Mike is back on board with Lindsay and wants Drea out. And then Drea wants Mike out. But then this is where Mike comes up with the plan on the beach of like, oh, those two are unworthy of winning, like Marianne and Romeo, who are left behind. We should just vote out Romeo. And then Drea looked at me and she said, I think we should go with it. And I was thinking, like, I feel like they're lying to you, because like they are. And so Mike did admit he was lying. And that's really when I realized Mike's playing, again, a bigger game than he's leading on. And in that moment also, I had been talking to Drea about how I was nervous about Mike having an immunity idol. And she told me that she had something that would take care of it, so not to worry about it. And I said, oh, like, what do you mean? And then she's like, oh, I can't tell you yet. But like, I said, is it a nullifier? And she's like, no, it's something new. And so in that moment, but that's all she said. So I said, oh, shoot, like Drea now has something. that is going to, it's a new advantage. I don't know what it is. And I had to like plan for maybe the fact that she might stay at this point. So at this point, I'm still just keeping everybody's information and not saying it to anybody because I was like, I don't know what I'm going to do. And so all of this chaos, Jonathan, Mike, Lindsay, or Jonathan, Mike, Drea, sidetrack of Romeo, but like mostly between them. Then we get to do or die, and it's a disaster because my number one ally decides to play, and I'm like, this is terrible if she goes home.
Were you surprised by the draw of the people that were playing in the challenge?
Yeah, I was. Well, yes and no. Like, I think at first I actually considered playing because I was like, I can definitely beat Romeo and I can definitely beat Mike in this challenge. But then I was like, wait, they're not going to play. So then I decided to sit out because I was like, I just don't see any way I'm going to go home this round at this point. So like, why would I put myself in that position? And I thought that everybody except Jonathan would sit out. So when Lindsay decided to play, I was like surprised. And like, I was like, I guess it makes sense, like, because she's so competitive, but like, this is not good for me if she goes home because even though Marianne and I were very close, we were still only doing the check-ins because we didn't want to be seen as too close. And she was kind of on the outs. So it was less socially acceptable for me to talk and strategize with her than it was with Lindsay, who was more on the in, like social dynamics. So Lindsay was working the closest with me at this point. So I didn't want her to go home. Also, some of the chaos Marianne caused this round as well, a little bit that wasn't shown, was she leaked to Mike that Jonathan wanted him out, but Jonathan didn't even tell her that. She just kind of made that up or something, but like, it was crazy that she was right. And I tried to be like, Mike, no, like, she's just doing stuff. And then she also came to me and said, I told Drea about the time that you warned me about her at the fake merge. And I was like, why would you do that, Marianne? She's going to be against me now. So this is actually one of the reasons that I wanted Drea out a little bit more at this point as well, is because Marianne leaked to her that I ratted her out for saying that about Marianne. And Marianne's goal, which she told me later, was she wanted to divide Drea and I. But I was like shocked that I thought she was just being sloppy with information. And I was like, now I need to get rid of Drea because she probably doesn't trust me because of what Marianne said. And then part of me was like, should I also get rid of Marianne because she's like saying too much for no reason?
Yeah.
But I just like loved her and wanted to work with her. And she was kind of constipated and not doing much at this point. But that was, again, intentional because she was still doing stuff without letting me know.
I mean, is she like taking pages from your book?
Probably,
but
it's also like so
fires?
weird that she told me that. Like, I was like, why would you tell me? So that's all. The fact that she told me was like, okay, I guess she's still on my side, but it was just a weird judgment call. It's not like she just did it behind my back and didn't tell me, but it was weird. I didn't know what to think of that. And throughout this whole time too, I was also distancing myself with Romeo because he and I were very close strategically, but I didn't want people to know that I was looking to him to sit next to me at the end.
Yeah.
And I think, again, that's a downside of the game that I was playing, is like, if you're so covert that people don't know your relationships, in that time, he got closer to Marianne than me, like, because I would be like, hang with Marianne, like, she's part of our alliance, like, you can trust her. And so he kind of left me and flocked to her a little bit. And that was a problem. But I was trying not to let people onto what we were doing either. So there's a catch-22.
Okay. Yeah. So Lindsay is headed into the do or die. Okay.
Yeah.
Drea tells you that she has
something.
Okay.
Yeah.
All right. And so, in talking this through between you and talking to Mike, there's also that you are letting Lindsay know what is going on, and that is also upsetting Jonathan.
Yeah. So this is literally where my game fell apart. So Drea pulls me aside and she says, because I said, I'm worried Mike's going to play an idol. What do we do in that situation? She's like, I'm going to take his idol. And I was like, oh, okay. Crazy. And so it was interesting because before she told me that, all the votes were going on her, except for probably her and Romeo voting for Mike. And I probably wanted Jonathan out at that point, which, again, in hindsight, I should have just stuck with Taku to some extent, but he won immunity, so it was not an option. And so then it was going to be Drea, but then she told me about what her advantage was. And then I was like, okay, I actually want to keep her now a little bit. Because for me, I got so focused on the nullifier and I didn't want to use it at 7 because I thought my covert game would be exposed so early, which kind of ended up being anyways. But like, I wanted to keep it for 5 because at this point I was also still very worried that the jury didn't know what I was doing. And so if they didn't know what I was doing, I would get no credit at the end. But if I play the nullifier at 5, there will be no doubt. And I think this is the first time in the game where I tried to think too many steps ahead and plan backwards as opposed to just playing with what was in front of me. And had I just played with what was in front of me, I think I would have been fine. And so I was like, I got to use the nullifier at 5. I got to use the nullifier at 5. So I need to know where the idol is. So when Drea told me she was going to take it and just play it, I was like, that's a waste. Like, she's going to take it, play it, and then we get Mike out. But like, then I don't know who's going to have the idol when it goes back into circulation. But then she said, oh, you know what? Maybe I won't play it. And because if we have enough votes, it could be her extra vote, Romeo, myself, and Lindsay. We could take out Mike. She could keep the idol. And I was like, okay, I'm down for her to keep the idol. We can get Mike out, and then I'll nullify her later in the game. So that's what I took to Jonathan right after she talked to me. So I pulled Jonathan aside, and because he's the only one that knew about it, but that was a mistake. I shouldn't have told him anything. And we decided in that moment that we would vote out Mike and let Drea stay in the game. And we would split our votes so that nobody knew we were working together. And we decided it's going to be Mike. And that was done. Then I was like, okay, well, I have to fill Lindsay in on the plan because she's my closest ally. So I brought her down to the beach. And we should have just had a conversation as a trio, to be honest. But we didn't want to be seen together as Taku, so we weren't doing that. But when I talked to Lindsay, and Lindsay had more loyalty to Mike because of their Jersey connection. And she also didn't trust Drea anymore because Drea had leaked to Mike that what she had said to him. So she really wanted Drea out. And she came up with the plan to take Mike's idol and keep it safe and blindside Drea. And I was like, oh, well, I guess that's a really good idea too, because we can then keep Mike in the game. He still has a final 3 with us. And she was worried if we burned Mike that he wouldn't vote for us at the end because she thought he might be emotional at the end, which I don't think he would have been, to be honest. But like, that's in hindsight. At the time, we're like, oh, okay, he gets mad. And if we betray him like that, he'll be really mad. So then she goes to talk to Mike to tell him about the advantage. And I go to talk to Jonathan. And this is where everything unraveled. So I told Jonathan, I was like, Lindsay actually has a better plan. We should just take Mike's idol, give it back to him, and we can nullify him out later in the game. And we still get out Drea, who's a bigger jury threat at this time. And he's like, does Lindsay know? I said, about what? He's like, the advantage. And I was like, yeah, she knows about knowledge is power because we had to tell her. And then he's like, does she know about the nullifier? And I was like, no. And I said, Jonathan, you need to stop freaking out because Drea is watching us right now. So if we freak out, she's going to know something's up. And he's like, okay. And then I saw him, by this point, Lindsay and Mike came back. And I saw him take Lindsay and go into the woods. And in that moment, I knew this is trouble because he's heated. He knows something's going on. He probably doesn't like that we changed the vote without consulting him. And maybe he thinks, and I think he thought, oh, we're closer, Lindsay and I, at this point, because we changed the vote without including him in on the decision. And we're just kind of telling him what to do, which was a mistake. And I saw him take her. And I just think my anxiety and like real life issues of avoidance came into play here, where I just didn't want to hear anything bad. And I was like, hopefully it'll be okay. Because when he came back, I said, are you okay? Like, what is going on? And he said, we're good. And I just wanted to believe that I didn't make a mistake. But I should have gone to Lindsay, and I knew that in the moment, and I avoided it. And if I had gone to her, I would have found out that she told him a different story, and that Jonathan really doesn't trust us anymore because he knows that we lied to him.
Yeah.
And so that's all I needed to know for the rest of the game to be different. But I was my own worst enemy in that moment. And I take like full responsibility for that. That was a mistake. But then anyway, Mike gave me the idol.
Don't beat yourself up too much. I'm pretty sure. Did you get a fishy that night?
Yes, but that's probably where my game fell apart, interestingly.
Yeah. So had Jonathan told Mike about the idol nullifier?
Well, from what I understand, he told Mike about the nullifier before that vote. I obviously wasn't
because when I spoke with Mike said the only reason that he went along with the plan to give the idol away was because he knew about the idol nullifier, and because Jonathan had said to him the reason why that they'll give you the idol back is because they're going to try to nullify it.
Yeah, I mean, I have no reason to believe that's false because that's
so. Why
what
was it
told
okay
me.
for Mr. Jonathan, to tell about the idol nullifier, but not okay for you?
Tell who? Sorry. Oh, yeah. Well, I mean, I think at that point he realized, oh, Lindsay and Omar are tighter than they're letting on, and
so he told after.
Yeah, he told after. So sorry, yeah. So after he realized that I told Lindsay is when he told Mike. And he's like, I need to make a different plan because those two are closer than they are to me, even though he thought that he and I were the closest. And so he's like, I need to go to Mike and change the game, which is a good play for him at that point, honestly. So then when Mike found out about the nullifier, he's like, okay, I can't trust those two like I thought I could. And I'm going to go along with this plan for now. But obviously we'll change the plan later. And I just didn't know that the full extent of that happening, and that all happened because I told Lindsay, and like in the short time I had to figure out what to do is when it all fell apart. And I remember I think in hindsight the play would have been to probably let Drea take the idol and nullify her out of the game, but in the moment I wanted to have my cake and eat it too, and like use the nullifier later, and it was just too fancy.
No, that's going to be the next round when you have your cake. But
yes, true.
So hypothetically, and we tried to logic this out. Okay, if you just say nothing, Drea says, "I'm going to take Mike's idol," and you don't tell a soul that this is going to happen. Drea takes Mike's idol that night.
Yeah.
What happens the rest of the game? So Mike will get voted out. Drea will play the idol that night.
I think she told me, so originally she was going to take it and play it. And then she told me she was going to take it and not play it because we had the votes to vote out Mike. And then right before we left, she told me she was going to take it and play it again and just get rid of it. So she would have played it that night. And so then it came down to whether I would nullify her idol and get her out of the game or go with her plan and vote out Mike. And I think at that point, I probably would have nullified her out of the game to keep trust with Mike.
Yeah, because Jonathan. She would have taken the idol from Mike, and then everybody would have been like, "Oh my God! All right, it is time to vote." And then you go and play the idol nullifier.
Yeah. I think that would have been the better play in hindsight, but obviously, and the thing is, I could have had some plausible deniability of doing that unless Jonathan opened his mouth, which was a problem. Like the fact that Jonathan knew I had the nullifier really was a problem. But the problem is that we found it together. So maybe I should have voted him out earlier, so that I would be the only one in the game that knew, but he was also working very closely with me and doing everything I said up until that point. So it was hard to lose an ally like that who was so, you tell him do this and he does that, So I think to some extent I underestimated him as well because I didn't think he would pick up on the fact that Lindsay and I were closer, and he did.
Yeah. Okay. And then if Drea does go out that night, you have not lost Jonathan's trust. And you have not lost Mike's trust. Right. Then how does the rest of the game play out?
Well, I think then the big question becomes does Jonathan expose the fact that I had the nullifier because he was questioning the big move side of it or not? But I think without losing that trust with Mike doesn't necessarily turn on Lindsay and I, in which case, I think I would have been fine in terms of flexibility. Like I had Taku, I had Romeo, I had that. So I think probably Jonathan or Mike would go out next. And then, my ideal final four at that point was Lindsay, Marianne, and Romeo and I. And I think we could have made that happen or could have let Mike slide in there in position of Marianne or Lindsay potentially, depending on how things played out. But I think it's so hard to know for sure.
Yeah.
But I think I would have been in a much better position.
Yes. Okay.
Obviously.
All right. So ultimately, Drea ends up getting voted out. Now, my other question about this is, could Mike have not taken the idol to tribal council? Was that a rule that they have to take the idols to? This is a big question for the fans.
I honestly don't know. I don't know what would have happened if he didn't take it there. I really have no idea. So, I would love to know as well.
Yeah, because we had wondered instead of okay, give it to another person, it's like, okay, Mike, just don't bring your idol to tribal council tonight. Right. Trust us.
Right. Which I think would also raise suspicious flags for him, I would imagine. But I don't know, unfortunately. And the thing about the knowledge is power thing too is I really wanted Lindsay to take that idol But again, she was going to do or die. If she died, the idol's out. And so it kind of fell on me to do it. And I didn't want to be the person to do it at that point in the game, but I didn't really have a choice in the matter at that moment. And then I guess at Tribal Council, it was crazy. Like the fact that she won her game, it was like outrageous. Everybody went wild, and we're really, honestly, most people were happy just because nobody wanted anybody to go out in that way. If you go out, we want people to get voted out. And then when Drea got voted out, she exposed like, everybody's secrets or whatever. And a lot of people were like, oh, do you think that was fair or not? And like, I didn't think it was unfair because it's not against the rules by any means. Like nobody says you can't say stuff on your way out.
Yeah.
And
Chanel already did it.
Yeah, Chanel had already done it. And I was actually anticipating possibly something worse. So I was actually a little bit relieved by what came out because most people sitting there already knew that she's the one that told me. So it didn't seem like, I was actually a little bit relieved it wasn't worse. But I think I was more worried about it going live tribal after that because she could have realized I betrayed her and then made a play on me or put her 2 votes on me, which is, part of me was like, do I just vote for Mike? But then I was like, no, because I don't know where her votes are going anymore. And like I was like, if that happens, well, at least I have Mike's idol. I can play it on myself if I really need to. But yeah, so it didn't really bother me. I don't think it was really out of bounds. I think that if that's something that the show thinks is not good, then they can make that a rule moving forward. But I don't feel like hurt or upset about that at all.
Okay. All right. So then we get to the final 6.
Yes,
okay?
my bumbling idiot phase.
So talk to us a little bit about like where you are at this point in the game, because you're going to win a challenge. There's going to be some the highs and lows here for this episode of television. Well, it starts off pretty good.
Yeah. So I mean, coming into this night, I was like, this is great because at this point I still don't know that Jonathan and Mike are onto me. But Mike is like begging for the idol back in front of everybody. I'm like, this is so annoying. Like, but this is like, at that point I was like, okay, Mike's very like, he wants things done his way at this time and this and whatever. So I was like, okay, this is consistent with his actions from before, but I just wish we weren't being so obvious in front of the whole group. But what I didn't know is that he really wanted it back because he knew the game that I was playing on him. So that makes it more understandable. So I give it back to him, and Marianne saw that. And I think that really triggered her because she assumed that Lindsay had it because Mike and Lindsay were close. So the fact that I had it, she's like, oh, dang, like he is playing the game. And I just remember like, okay, I think I said in the show, like, it's time to put a wedge between Jonathan and Mike. But the thing is that wedge had already been there. I just didn't know it was repaired because Mike or Jonathan wanted to make a move on Mike twice, not once, but twice. So then all I had to do was tell Mike that Jonathan wanted you out and he was coming for you, and then it would be done. But I didn't know that they had already made up. So in terms of like the actual work to do it, it was already done. It was just a matter of maintaining that and then flipping Mike with one last piece of information. But by then he didn't believe me anymore. And then looking back, this was so dumb because there's so many warning signs that I just missed. And I think it's like, I think you guys talked about it a lot on the podcast of like, oh, when a winner goes back and they have never been left out of a vote, and even yourself, like you weren't left out of any votes in Amazon. So then it felt like a little bit different when you were. You don't really know what that feels like. And you wonder, like, am I being paranoid? Am I being annoying? Like there were paranoid players in the game that really irritated me and other people. And I didn't want to be that person. So I was like, let me just be chill, but I should have been more internally paranoid. And it was weird because it was almost supernatural. Like I just like the morning after Drea got voted out, I woke up and I just sprung up like this. And I just felt so uneasy. And I looked around. Mike and Jonathan were not sleeping next to me like they normally are. And then I looked to the right, and Marianne, Jonathan, and Mike were all talking by the fire. And I was like, that's odd. Like, that doesn't usually happen. What's going on here? And then, but I was like, it's fine. And then Marianne came up to me at one point and was like, so Marianne and I was always chitter chatter before each challenge by this point about like Survivor super fandom stuff. What our favorite seasons, overrated winners, underrated players, best seasons, worst seasons, whatever. We would just gab and gab. And then she said to me in the middle of that, she's like, what are we going to eat together on day 26 when we get to Ponderosa after Final Tribal? she said, you're not getting your own food. We're sharing everything. And I was like, this is like a really weird thing to say to me right now. We never talked about this stuff, but I guess I definitely want my own pizza. Like, don't touch it. And then in hindsight, like obviously she's trying to make me feel more comfortable. But in
Little
the
did you
moment,
know you would have all the
all the
pizza
pizza
you
I
could handle.
wanted.
Yes.
Yes, I did get a pineapple pizza.
Hmm.
And then Mike and Jonathan, like up until that point, Jonathan would always look at me and be like, "Are we good? Are we good? Is the plan the same?" He would mouth it to me every time, and he would also do that multiple times in tribal council. To when Lindsay had said, "Oh, we're trying to level the playing field," when High went out, he was freaking out, and I kept trying to be like, "Calm down, it's fine. You're gonna tip off High."
Oh
Um,
yeah, that's such a good question because
yeah,
that we talked about that a lot on the podcast. Of okay, Lindsay said that thing, and it's like,
yeah.
is John, was this just an elaborate thing to fake out High, where then Jonathan is in on it to like acting like, oh my god, what's happening?
No, I think Lindsay wanted to say something that would troll Jonathan a little bit, but then also would be true to High, but not sound like High.
Hmm.
And so it was like the perfect answer to give, but he was freaking out and he would look at
Yeah.
me being like, "What's going on?" And I'd be like, "It's fine. Just like, shut up. Like, it's good. We're
Hmm.
good. We're good. We're good."
Yeah, yeah.
And after I was like, "Fucking Lindsay, like, what the hell?" And we all had a laugh about it, but it was really funny in the moment. But he would always look at me, "Are we good? Are we good?" And then I kept telling him, "You need to stop doing that because people are looking at that and it's very obvious. Like, you're not being subtle." And so I just thought that maybe he listened to my advice, but really he was just doing it to Mike instead of me.
Hmm.
And then Mike also, kind of before tribal council, he would pull, at first he was doing that with High, and then he would do it with me and Lindsay, pull us aside 4 or 5 times to basically reaffirm the same plan. And I think the round before, I said to Mike, like, you need to stop doing that because Drea is literally watching us. She knows that you just pulled me aside again and again and again, and we're going to give away the plan. And so again, I thought maybe he was listening to me, but he was just doing it with Jonathan. And there were several times where I saw Jonathan and Mike talking, and one of them was in the show. You saw me kind of creep up, being like, "Is something going on?" And I was like, "Why are they talking if they're going against each other?" Like, but then I'm like, I don't want to be paranoid. And right before we went to tribal, even they went for one last chat. Lindsay, Marianne, and I were sitting by the fire, and I said, "What is going on over there? What, we need to stop that conversation." And Marianne was like, "I'll go stop it." And I was like, "Thanks."
Yeah.
And then she went over and she's like, "You need to stop. They're getting suspicious." And so it was kind of funny, but then you know, there were so many warning signs, and I just
Yeah.
didn't take them seriously.
There's so clear after the fact. So Marianne had to play her extra vote that night.
Yes.
Where were you at in terms of what Marianne was going to be doing with her extra votes?
Yeah, we thought she would just throw an extra vote onto Mike or Jonathan. Like, one of her votes would go to Mike, one would go to Jonathan, and then we would just be done with it. It wouldn't make a difference. And it just, we had reaffirmed our final four and thought that that was all good. I think, after, in the history of the season so far, like, we would get like a crazy vote like Lydia, followed by a calm vote like Chanel, and then Roxroy and Tori, one was crazy, one was not. And then High was very calm at camp after, and then Drea's was very crazy at camp. So I was like, it didn't feel that out of the ordinary to have another calm day before going to tribal. And I was such a loser in my confessional. I was like, now I'm playing the status quo because that's going to benefit me. And they're idiots for not voting me out, but like, I don't get it. And then they were. And
Surprised that they didn't put that in the show.
I know, me too. I was like, I was shocked they
They
didn't
did
put
you
it
a
in.
solid.
They did me a solid, but it was also kind of funny. You got to make fun of yourself.
Mm-hmm.
So I was kind of hoping they would, but whatever.
Yeah.
But then anyway, so it didn't feel that out of the ordinary. And Jonathan had also passed out from being too hungry right before I got voted out, and I had to like hold his legs up and all of that. And so I thought, okay, maybe people are just like, he's just so, and Jonathan could barely form sentences at this point.
Mm-hmm.
So I was like,
Yeah.
he's not doing anything because he can't think right now. He's too low on energy and fuel that he's passing out. And anyway, so then Lindsay and I had talked before, after the immunity challenge. I was like, I think you should play the amulet on me. And, I didn't even remember her saying about the circulation thing because it didn't really make sense because that was the last time you could play that thing. So it wouldn't really go into circulation after. But from what I understand, like, the bigger reason was not wanting to like show other people that she was more loyal to me than to them.
Mm-hmm.
And, we weren't in enough we didn't think we were in enough danger to do that. And I also didn't want to be very pushy, and because that wasn't my game style. Obviously, if I had it for myself, I would have played it. But that is a big regret, is not getting, being more forceful, I guess you could say.
Yeah. As far as you two being together, they've been new in terms of.
Yeah. And I mean, they had, and to be fair, we hid it for so long that Jonathan was shocked about it. But by then they knew, and we didn't know that they knew.
Yeah.
And even with Romeo, like, I was, again, trying not to have one-on-ones with Romeo that were very long, because I didn't want people to know that we were close. But this was another opportunity where I should have had that conversation with him, because he didn't want to vote me out. Like, Marianne had to really lay it on thick to get him to switch his vote. He really wanted Mike or Jonathan out. So who knows, if I had had a conversation with him, maybe he would have divulged what was going on and we could have made a different plan.
Well, and if we just play that out in terms of okay, Lindsay has the presence of mind to say, you know what, let's not leave it to chance. I gotta, I'm playing the amulet on Omar. You're safe tonight. Okay, boom. Yeah. That vote ends up being
a tie,
going to a 2-2 tie. Yeah. Okay, Jonathan versus Romeo. That we'll find out the answer for sure when I talk to Marianne. But do you believe that Marianne would do what in that spot?
So Marianne told me that she would have voted out Jonathan in that spot.
Oh, interesting. Because I would have said that, but I guess that she was close with Romeo.
Yeah, so I guess that was kind of the brilliance of Marianne's plan. And in essence, is like, she kind of did what I did at the Lydia vote, but she did it with the final 6, in that she gave everybody a different story, but really was in charge of the whole outcome to some extent. Like,
and that was after the game, she told you.
Yeah. Okay. So she had Jonathan and Mike putting votes on Romeo. She told Romeo that they were all voting for me, so he didn't know it was a split. And then the double cross comes with, if I end up playing the amulet, she's going to keep Romeo and vote out Jonathan. But they thought that it would be Romeo, is from what I understand. So she had all these different people thinking different things, and she was going to do the optimal outcome for her. Okay. But I think that if she did that, it actually might have not been the best move, just because Romeo would have been betrayed by her and Mike. And so if Jonathan goes there, then it's the final 5, and Romeo was just betrayed by Mike and Marianne to some extent, because he didn't know he was getting votes split on him.
Right.
So then Lindsay and I can take him as 3 against 2.
Yeah, I actually think that the better move is to vote out Romeo in that spot, because she had already made that final 3 with Jonathan and Mike, and then they could vote out Lindsay still at 5. She still has her idol. And then ultimately now at the final 4, I guess Jonathan.
And I would have still had my nullifier too.
You would still have the nullifier.
Yeah.
Sure.
So Mike and Marianne would probably still have their idols, which we didn't know about Marianne's, but
and Mike won immunity.
Mike won immunity, but it was also a puzzle, which I think I would have had a good chance at. Talking about historical context of how the puzzles had gone. So I think, obviously it would be me or him that would win, because he beat all of them and I didn't compete in it. So I think if I had won, it would have been a lot clearer of a path for us. Whereas if he won, we would have to do a little bit more maneuvering, because 2 idols could then get played on Marianne, and then one of us would probably go home. So
how do you think you are at Samotion?
I think I'm better than 3 balls, but, but I don't know. Okay. I think there's a good chance that I could have made it to the end had I made it through that tribal council. But also, there's so much variabilities. If you have that much immense pressure on you, do you choke? Do you not? I don't know. But I think it would have been a fun game had Lindsay played the amulet, because it would have broke it wide open again. And, I had been so covert. Now I'm exposed, but got saved. And how does that play out? I think it would have been really fun. And I wish she had played the amulet, obviously, for me. But it was also a really good move for Marianne, Jonathan, and Mike. So there's no hard feelings about that at all. I also did consider playing the shot in the dark, but not for the reasons that I thought I was going home. It was the last time to play it. I didn't want to go home with something in my pocket. But then the pettier side of me was like, if I'm going to put Jonathan out of the game, I got to write his name down, I got to claim that. So I'm just going to vote for him instead of lose my vote. But this is kind of funny. But then you also wonder, if you played it, even if you thought you were safe, what would the reactions be from the other people? Would it tip you off that you were in danger? And then does Lindsay play her amulet? There's so many what ifs, but ultimately I feel kind of dumb, because I did play super stupid in the last few days, but at the same time, you only have so much information to operate on. And I don't stay up at night wondering what if either,
And it was a great move to get you out of the game.
Yeah, for
You know,
sure. For sure.
3-2-2
Yeah.
vote, you know,
Yeah.
you had a great reaction to it. So,
Yeah.
you know, and you played a great game
Yeah.
along the way, and it was super fun to watch. One
Thank
of the things
you.
that I had been thinking about, you know, leading up to this interview was you in the final tribal council and what that might have looked like. You know, Marion did such a great job in the final tribal council.
Yeah.
We saw Mike get, you know, sort of like a frigid reception
Yeah.
from the jury.
Yeah.
And you've talked about how that you were not received especially well
Yeah.
at the Ponderosa.
Yeah.
And I am wondering how you would have done with the jury and
Yeah.
whether or not, you know, maybe in this one of these other dimensions in the multiverse at the final tribal council, if you come in and face a jury that's pretty hot.
Right. Yeah. So I think it's really honestly almost too hard to say for sure. I'll give you the context of everything that happened at Ponderosa, but you know, also with my experience at Ponderosa, a lot of opinions changed in the last 24 to 36 hours that were not the case when I got there. So Marianne was like the clear front runner when I first got there, and then by the end, a lot of people were saying Mike. So, and that was like unforeseeable. I never thought people would be on board for Mike when I first got there, given the reaction that the people had towards him. But then by the end, like,
well, what changed?
See, that's what I think it's just seeing how the rest of the game plays out, you know, and people's personal afflictions and how they change with what they see in front of them, and maybe the realization of, oh, this is what's actually going to happen, like we now have to reward someone with $1 million. Like, I think so I would say that based on my reception when I left the game, it would have been an uphill battle to win. I think I definitely would have won against certain people, but those were not necessarily the people I was trying to get to the end with. Like, I think it would have been hard to beat a Marianne or a Lindsay, but also so much changes in that time. And with new people coming into Ponderosa, you get more information that it is possible that things could have changed. I think for me and how to face the jury, it depends how they came at me and how shocked I would have been. But I was like very surprised by the reception that I did receive. So in that moment, I don't know how I'd have reacted to that. And I would say that when I left the game, I was like it was surreal. I don't know. I think your blindside was tougher because it was earlier on in the game, whereas I had made it I had kind of a similar feeling as what you described in your Amazon journey, even though you weren't blindsided there, but I was. It was like, oh, you know, I feel like I've done enough. I had like a pretty good story, and I feel good with how I played the game. But in that moment, I wasn't mad. Like, I thought I would be, but I wasn't mad at all at anybody. I was kind of I was sad for me, but like kind of proud for them for what they figured me out. Like, I would have done that too. So it was really weird, cool experience to like be blindsided and then get your torch snuffed and be part of this like amazing adventure. And then you sit in the tent alone for a little bit before your final words, and you feel that and there's a huge spider. Like, I've never seen a spider that big, and I was kind of freaked out. But you don't, like, you feel a little bit sad because you're like, oh, did I disappoint my family by getting so close and then just missing it? But then you're like, but you had a great time. And all the producers and stuff were like super nice to me. So I felt really good about that. So then it was very difficult to, you know, get to Ponderosa and then have not a good reception.
So, Omar, with everything that you went through, the good and the bad, would you return to Survivor? Would you go back to Fiji?
At first I said I'm not sure because it was it was a lot, but then now enough time has passed and I've kind of healed from all my wounds, and I had a great time. I loved watching the whole show. I loved listening to all the coverage. I loved all the fans, and I can really only say that the positive memories will live on, and I would do it again.
Yes.
And so even though there was some trauma, I think none of that trauma came from in the game. It's totally overshadowed by all the good and amazing things that have happened out of this experience.
All right. My second question. If they had Heroes versus Villains 2, are you a villain?
I think so, right?
I think you are.
I think so. But maybe like a a fun villain and not like
Yeah, I think
a
a fun
monster.
a fun villain. Like you're not
Yeah.
Russell.
No.
But I think that you had fun being bad, and I think that
Yes.
that's like the exact sort of energy we're looking for from
Yeah.
villains on Survivor.
That's like a parrot. A parrot is like fun and lovable, but naughty, you know? That's what I want to be.
Yeah. Do you have any fun animal facts you want to share with us?
Ooh,
I feel like
well,
that in the little bit that we've spoken, outside of this, I feel like that I found out so many fun animal facts, but I feel like that you've
do you want
really
that animal fact?
no,
Because that's
no,
the
not
best
I don't need
one.
that one. But I feel like you've been so restrained in all of your animal interests.
Yes, I would say that okay, my favorite animal that I saw on the show was the fruit bat by far, and a lot of people have these negative connotations about bats in general. They think that they're like disgusting vermin, and yes, sure, maybe they started a pandemic, but the reason they started the pandemic was humans and their farming of like putting all these animals in close proximity.
Mm-hmm.
But bats, they can actually live their whole life upside down because they have alterations in their blood flow so that they don't get a head rush. And so that's really cool. And they also are super cute. And they also do things that actually, I'm not going to go there because it's a family podcast.
Yes.
But they are the only mammals that can really truly fly, and that's pretty cool. They're like bird adjacent,
Okay.
and only vampire bats drink blood. And
Yeah.
if you've ever seen a fruit bat eat a grape, it's the cutest thing you'll ever see.
Okay. You told me recently that a misconception was that a owl is not an especially intelligent animal.
Yeah. So
Um,
owls, even though I wanted to be the owl in the night,
yes. Yes.
and I got hit by a car with Ajax license plates, Marianne, but they are actually quite stupid,
Mm-hmm.
and their eyeballs are bigger than their brain, and they're very instinctual. So they're good at hunting. They can hear a mouse's heartbeat under a foot of snow from a football field away for some species. Their
Wow.
ears are on different levels sometimes so that they can hear in different planes. So they're very good survivalists, but they're not especially intelligent. If you've ever worked with an owl, it's like there's not a lot going on up there. But they don't need it because they're Darwinian in their own way. They got their niche on lock.
Mm-hmm. Yeah. Well, you had said that you were going to be an owl in the night, and I said, "Wait, hold on. I thought you just said I didn't like owls when I was watching the first episode."
Love owls, love pigeons, love birds. They're better than people. But the misnomer of an owl is smart or wise is false.
Okay.
Also, I feel like I didn't shout out Marianne enough. And Marianne
Yes.
is like a super deserving winner. I loved playing with her. She totally like sniped me, and I respect it. Love Marianne. Can't wait for you to talk to her tomorrow.
You two are great friends. We will give Marianne all of her flowers in her interview.
And Mike and Romeo too. They did awesome. And
sure, but this
awesome.
was you're here.
Yeah.
we're here to talk about you today.
Yeah, I suppose so.
Yeah. So you can have something, right?
Yes, I can have something too. So that's all. It's all good.
Mm-hmm. Okay, Omar, what's next for you post Survivor?
I have my avian and exotic board exam in October, so I need to actually hunker down and study because they're like, you need to study for a year for this exam, and I obviously haven't done anything in the last 4 months. So better get to cracking the books open and back to work for me.
Okay. Any other fun stories from life outside of Survivor?
Outside of Survivor, no, I'm just living my best life, and no, I'm just chilling right now.
Mm-hmm.
I guess the fun story was when I dislocated my knee in a mascot dance-off, but that was years ago.
Mm-hmm. Yeah.
Still suffering to this day.
Oh, it didn't hold you back on the show.
Oh, you don't know that.
Yeah.
Maybe I would have won that last immunity challenge.
Maybe.
If it weren't for.
Maybe. Any fun plans for the summer?
Just studying, Rob. Just studying.
That's it.
Yeah.
Omar, you're a reality star now.
I know. Maybe. Oh, I'm gonna actually play some sort of Twitch game with Puya on Sunday. It's about a goose or something of that sort.
Yeah. Are you okay with this? I believe that birds are murdered in this game.
Birder, do you mean?
Mm-hmm.
Actually, Hi and I were the Bird Bros. That was our alliance name. And then when I voted
Mm-hmm.
him out, I said, "This is Birder in the first degree." You know what? I didn't know that the birds were going to get killed in
Yeah.
that, and I'll have some words for it, but maybe I'll bring a Diet Pepsi and it'll all be okay.
Okay. All right. Anything else you want to tell our listeners?
I really appreciate all the RHAP community. I love you all. I've been a part of it for years, even though I've been a lurker silently, except when I'm technologically challenged or have something to say about birds. So I appreciate everybody, especially you, Rob, for doing a great job. And I need you to get Stacey Powell on the podcast again.
Well, you know what? She used to be like a regular.
She was a
and
regular. I
then
don't know what happened.
she didn't want to talk about Survivor anymore. We'll see if T-Bird can crack the case.
Yeah, tell her that I personally want her to come back on.
I'm sure she's watching
I know.
regularly.
And
Yeah.
maybe even with Christine, you can do salt and pepper.
Yeah, Christine Markowski would be a good talking with T-Bird person too.
Yeah, but the both of them together would be magic.
That would be Coach's worst nightmare.
Benjamin.
Okay.
Benjamin.
All right, well, Omar, thank you for spending so much time with us here tonight.
Thank you so much for having me. I had a blast.
Yeah, this was great to go through your game. Please, come back anytime. And do you want to give a hashtag to everybody that made it to the end of your interview?
Ooh, let's do hashtag birder. BURDER.
Okay, hashtag birder. And also doesn't count if you just skipped ahead to hear Omar's Ponderosa stories. Okay. Only the people that will listen the whole time use the hashtag. Okay.
Right. Well, hopefully you got the tea you wanted in this podcast.
Yes. Okay. Well, Omar, I hope we have many more chats in the future. Thank you so much for coming on. Thanks everybody for listening. We will have more Survivor 42 interviews all through the month of June. Make sure you subscribe to Rob's podcast. Rob has a website.com/subscribe. Take care, everybody. Have a good one. Bye.
Thank you.